There are 3 stories in Treyarch's Zombies mode. The Either story introduced and featured in Call of Duty, World at War, Call of Duty, Black Ops, Call of Duty, Black Ops 2, Call of Duty, Black Ops 3 and Call of Duty, Black Ops 4. The Chaos story featured in Black Ops 4. And the Dark Either saga introduced in Call of Duty, Black Ops Cold War and Call of Duty, Vanguard. The Treyarch Zombies timeline can be used to view exactly when the events of the Either story occurred. Either story. In the beginning, there were only the Either and Keepers. Among them were 2 beings who would later be known by many names. One would be known as Dr. Monty, the other being as the Shadowman. In time, the Keepers crafted the Summoning Key, a device that allows them to manipulate the Either. Holding power over reality itself, they used it to create Agartha. The Keepers later mastered the ability to travel between dimensions. At some point, several Keepers, among which the Shadowman, began experimenting with the Dark Either, an energy beneath creation. The Dark Either corrupted and corroded their souls, and the corrupted Keepers became known as the Apothecans. The Apothecans created the Either Pyramid, a device capable of absolute power. A schism formed between them and the Keepers untainted by the Dark Either. Soon after, a war broke out between Apothecans and uncorrupted Keepers. Facing defeat, the Apothecans hid the Either Pyramid on a moon within one of the newly discovered dimensions. After banishing the Apothecans to the Dark Either, the remaining Keepers took on the mantle of Guardians. Trapped in the Dark Either, the Apothecans evolved over eons into twisted creatures that now bear little resemblance to their Keeper brethren. They desired, above all else, to return to Agartha. By September 5c, the Apothecans, knowing the Earth has a gateway to Agartha, sent meteors containing element 115 to the planet in different dimensions across space and time. They believe humanity will one day use element 115 to wage war among themselves, opening a rift that will allow the Apothecans to escape the Dark Either. The Great War. On January 15, 1292, the Great War between humanity, including the Wolf King, and the Apothecans began across dimensions. During the war, Sir Pablo Marinus was saved from the clutches of Amargua by 4 heroes known as Primus. On December 31, 1299, after more than 7 years of war, Primus, with the Keepers and the rest of humanity, defeated the Apothecans, bringing the Great War to an end. Before they seemingly disappeared from history, Primus instructed the Wolf King to begin building his castle, that would later be known as Der Eisendrache. Several years later, honoring the Wolf King's dying request, his loyal servant Arthur scattered and buried his bones in the grounds of Der Eisendrache, accompanied by the King's Wolf. Arthur was then teleported by temporal rifts to Resolution 1295 and 2025 Angola. Ultimus story. In 1885, a blacksmith named Jebediah Brown was living in a mining town called Purgatory Point in the Old West. The mine contained large amounts of element 115, which started to affect people who went down there. One of the miners turned into a zombie and attacked Jebediah's mother, killing her. Wanting to find answers, Jebediah went down in the mine where he spent 5 days without realizing it. Later, on April 19th, Jebediah had a vision in his sleep. 2 angels asked him to build a machine, a pack-a-punch machine, which became a success in the town. On June 30th, Jebediah had another vision. The 2 angels asked him to create an Agarthan device. The Agarthan device had 3 components: the blood of an elder god found at the bottom of the ocean, an elemental shard created by forging 4 human souls to a rock of element 115, and a metallic vril vessel. Jeb managed to craft the vessel, but had no means of obtaining the blood or the souls. After crafting the vril vessel, Jebediah upgraded it with the pack-a-punch. As a result of this, and the fracturing of the Earth after Ultimus helped Maxis launch rockets from the moon in 2025, a temporal rift was created, transporting the entire town, including Jebediah, to an underground cavern in Angola. Afterwards, zombies began to overrun the now-buried town, killing any of its remaining inhabitants including Jebediah. On June 30, 1908, a meteor containing element 115 crashed near the stony Tunguska River in Siberia. Over the next decades, more deposits of element 115 were discovered in Germany, Japan, the United States of America and on the moon. In 1931, after a large deposit of element 115 was found in Breslau, Dr. Ludwig Maxis formed Group 935 as an international German-led research team, becoming its head scientist. The Der Reis facility was established at Breslau. Maxis sought to use the newly discovered element to improve the human condition by developing advanced technologies. He invited Dr. Edward Richthofen, who would later be known as Ultimus Richthofen, to join Group 935. Richthofen agreed, secretly acting on behalf of the Illuminati's interests. By 1939, Maxis and Ultimus Richthofen started working on the first teleportation experiments with a matter transference prototype. The experiments were unsuccessful. The subjects were teleported, but their chemical composition was altered, leaving them catatonic and changed. Ultimus Richthofen also began the development of the Wunderwaffe DG2. In the same year, Maxis turned to the Reichstag and the Nazi Party for additional funding. They agreed to the request, expressing interest in Group 935's weapons research, teleportation technology, and the reanimated undead subject to help the Axis win the war. 1. Ultimus Richthofen and Dr. Schuster continued working on teleportation and successfully teleported a walnut during test trial 151. The result, however, failed to impress Maxis, who revealed to Ultimus Richthofen that Group 935 would be soon funded by Nazi Germany. Ultimus Richthofen worried this would lead to mass defections. He decided to continue the experiments with Schuster behind Maxis's back. In early 1940, Ultimus Richthofen and Schuster conducted the first human teleportation test. Ultimus Richthofen was so confident in its success that he volunteered himself. He was teleported to the moon where he encountered the Ether Pyramid, calling it MPD. While inspecting the device, Ultimus Richthofen was electrocuted and began hearing many voices of corruption, including the Shadowmans. He was then teleported to Shangri-La in the Himalayas, where he was worshipped by the natives who built an altar in his name. Ultimus Richthofen also encountered the focusing stone for the first time. Corrupted by the dark ether, Ultimus Richthofen was gradually driven insane by an obsession to reach Agartha. Ultimus Richthofen returned to Der Reis a few weeks later with a plan to build a station on the moon, called Griffin Station. He also renounced his involvement with the Illuminati. Frustrated with Maxis's alignment with Germany, other disgruntled Group 935 scientists joined his cause. Several months later, Maxis contacted the Reichstag High Command requesting additional funds, stating that Der Reis lacked not only the funding, but a sufficient volume of element 115 as well. In response to his request, Nazi Germany built two new facilities in Berlin for Group 935. They were known as the Kino facility, a repurposed theater, and the asylum facility at the Wittenau Sanatorium. The Imperial Japanese Army handed over the Rising Sun facility to Group 935, which collaborated with Division 9 at the facility site. Group 935 also established a facility in Siberia near the Tunguska River and a research facility at Der Eisendrake called Eagle's Nest. By 1942, Griffin Station was completed. Ultimus Richthofen appointed Dr. Graf as lead scientist and tasked him and Schuster to discover a way to power the MPD. While at the Rising Sun facility, Maxis developed the ray gun prototype, while H. Porter worked on the second-generation model. In May 1942, after soldiers returned from Africa, Ultimus Richthofen reported that they found a number of artifacts from an American town. Among the artifacts and documents recovered was pieces of the Pack-a-Punch machine from Jebediah Brown. Ultimus Richthofen gave the schematics to H. Porter to replicate Brown's work. Ultimus Richthofen also discovered plans for the Agarthan device and the Vril vessel, as well as the Vril device. On June 13, 1942, as a result of temporal rifts caused by Ultimus traveling through time to reach the Kino facility in 1963, Dr. Monty reached across time and space and offered little nudges. One nudge is helping Group 935 to develop element 115 fused elixirs. They created 4 medicinal beverages known colloquially as Juggernog, Quick Revive, Speed Cola, and Double Tap. At Griffin Station, Graf and Schuster unwittingly discover how to charge the MPD. When Schuster killed a rat near the device, its death inexplicably began charging the device by filling its tank. They reported their findings to Ultimus Richthofen, who began sending soldiers and scientists to be sacrificed to charge the MPD. By the end of 1942, Maxis expressed concern over element 115's impact on Ultimus Richthofen's behavior. Although no longer trusting him, he left his daughter Samantha in Ultimus Richthofen's care, as Maxis himself was transferred to the Kino facility, with his assistant Sophia, to focus on creating Germany's undead army. In 1943, Nikolai Belinsky, who would later be known as Ultimus Nikolai, was captured during the Battle of Stalingrad and became a test subject for Group 935. The same year, Takeo Misaki, who would later be known as Ultimus Takeo, was captured by Group 935 on the orders of the Emperor. In 1944, Pablo Marinas, a Mexican spy, was captured by Group 935 at Der Eisendrache. In his cell, Pablo wrote of visions of a great war. He described a great battle against strange demon-like creatures who were trying to devour the earth. In his visions, he saw 4 knights protected him from certain death. He made a note that the knights wore tunics similar to the statues in Der Eisendrache. In 1945, OSS operative Peter McCain infiltrated Group 935. In July 1945, Richthofen traveled to the Siberian facility to do further research on live specimens. As her temporary guardian, he took Samantha with him. Ultimus Richthofen also brought the Vril device with him. Several days after his arrival, a reporter was arrested near the facility. When Ultimus Richthofen interrogated him, the reporter revealed he was working for Mr. Rapt, who was looking for several artifacts, among them the Vril vessel. After Ultimus Richthofen refused to give him the vessel, he ordered the guards to kill the reporter. On August 1945, Group 935 began to transfer 3 test subjects for experimentation: Ultimus Nikolai, Pablo Marinas, and Ultimus Takeo. Ultimus Richthofen began experimenting on them few days after their arrival. Ultimus Richthofen also started looking at a way to create an elemental shard in order to build the Agarthan device. Suspecting Group 935 would lose control of their experiments, Peter's handler, Cornelius Purnell, sent a Marine recon team led by Tank Dempsey, who would later be known as Ultimus Dempsey, to extract McCain, whose cover had been blown. In September 1945, during an operation with Harvey Yena, another American spy, Ultimus Richthofen extracted Pablo Marinas' spleen. He noted that the barrier to unlock the human mind was not located in the spleen. Believing Marinas dead, they dumped him into the river. However, Pablo survived and would later awaken in a pocket dimension at the bottom of the river, before swimming back to the Siberian facility, where he would remain for the next 20 years. Several days later, the recon team arrived at the asylum facility, where an outbreak occurred. Ultimus Dempsey was captured and sent to Ultimus Richthofen in Siberia to replace Pablo Marinas. Ultimus Richthofen continued experimenting on Ultimus Dempsey, Nikolai and Takeo, and documented the personality traits of his test subjects. Dempsey's intellect seemed low, but his will was strong. Takeo was still staring at the floor, muttering what sounds like some kind of proverb over and over again. Nikolai had recently begun responding to stimuli, but only after injections of a new serum made primarily from vodka. Ultimus Richthofen noted that their minds had been almost entirely broken, with no memory remaining of who they once were. While at the Siberian facility, Ultimus Richthofen also experimented on Samantha. As he continued to find a way to build the Agarthan device, Ultimus Richthofen managed to siphon a piece of the souls of his 3 test subjects into a processed rock of element 115, using the Vril vessel. He used his own for the 4th soul required. As the souls were injected to the rock, it transformed and created a shard of glass. Unbeknownst to Ultimus Richthofen, by forging their souls to the element 115, he bound his soul and the ones from Nikolai Belinsky, Takeo Misaki and Tank Dempsey to the ether across all dimensions. All their different versions were now connected to the ether through time and space. After learning from Harvey Yena that Maxis didn't mass-produce the Wonderwolf DG2 as promised, Ultimus Richthofen started plotting to destroy Maxis and his daughter. He vowed that he would no longer continue to work on Maxis's undead army. With the war over, Maxis returned to Der Reis in October 1945 and ordered Ultimus Richthofen to do likewise, so they might continue their work on the matter transference device. Several days later, Ultimus Richthofen arrived at Der Reis with his test subjects and Samantha. On October 12, Graf contacted Ultimus Richthofen to inform him the MPD had been powered up and was awaiting the conduit. On October 13, 1945, during a series of teleportation test trials, Maxis used Samantha's dog Fluffy as test subject. Fluffy, now changed, was teleported back into the chamber. When Samantha saw Fluffy, she ran inside the teleporter. Maxis chased after her and Ultimus Richthofen sealed them in the test chamber before teleporting them away. While Maxis was teleported to the crazy place where he learned the power to merge with electricity, Samantha was teleported to Griffin Station. She ran inside the MPD where she became corrupted by the Dark Ether. When he learned about the incident, Ultimus Richthofen ordered Graf to teleport Maxis to the moon to coax Samantha out of the device. Maxis approached the MPD, and he persuaded her to come out. Once she did, Maxis gave her the instruction to kill them, all before killing himself and merging with the technology of Griffin Station. Samantha then entered the MPD and unleashed the undead upon the base, killing anyone involved with the organization. The next day, an outbreak occurred at the Der Reis facility. H. Porter activated the alarm before killing himself. Ultimus Richthofen returned to the facility where he awoke Ultimus Dempsey, Takeo and Nikolai. With no recollection of who they were or who Richthofen was, they agreed to help him. The four would become known as Ultimus, Richthofen's grand scheme. Several days later, Ultimus traveled to the Rising Sun facility where an outbreak occurred. In the facility, Ultimus discovered the corpse of Peter McCain, who died during a parachute incident after being ordered by Cornelius Purnell to rendezvous at the facility. Ultimus Richthofen also recovered his diary, which contained his research notes concerning element 115, and began to formulate a plan to defeat Samantha. A week later, Ultimus returned to Der Reis, where Ultimus Richthofen planned to use the teleporter to return to the moon and confront Samantha. However, the Wonderwolf DG-2 overloaded the teleporter and sent Ultimus to the Kino facility in 1963, causing Ultimus Richthofen to drop his diary, which was later recovered by the Soviet Union. This marked the first time Ultimus traveled across space and time and resulted in temporal rifts occurring across dimensions. In light of these developments, Monty felt obligated to step in and began to make changes in the background across time. He helped Group 935 invent perk machines. He also added chalk drawings to the walls. When Ultimus arrived at the Kino facility on October 28, 1963, they located a lunar lander and flew to the Ascension facility. In the weeks prior to Ultimus's arrival at the Ascension facility, a Russian scientist from the Ascension group named Yuri Zavoisky became corrupted by Samantha's voice. After reading Ultimus Richthofen's diary, Yuri tricked his colleague, Dr. Anton Jersh, into activating a Jersh device. The rift created allowed Samantha to travel through. It also absorbed Jersh, destroying his body and trapped him inside the Casimir mechanism. Yuri was also absorbed and transported to the Pentagon. When Ultimus arrived at the Ascension facility on November 6, 1963, they found the outbreak had occurred, and Jersh begged them to free him from the Casimir mechanism. At the same time, in the Pentagon, John F. Kennedy, Robert McNamara, Fidel Castro, and Richard Nixon were discussing a future alliance between the United States and Cuba to fight Samantha when an outbreak occurred inside the building. Yuri, who was responsible for a prior outbreak in the Pentagon, was sent by Samantha to thwart their survival. After Ultimus freed Jersh from the Casimir mechanism, he sent them to their next destination before beginning his travels across space and time. With the departure of Ultimus from the Cosmodrome, both outbreaks were contained and Yuri was arrested. Ultimus arrived in a locked room at the Siberian facility on March 17, 2011, where George A. Romero, who had stumbled upon Group 935's research, was making a movie with Sarah Michelle Gellar, Robert Englund, Danny Trejo, and Michael Rooker. An outbreak soon occurred, and George Romero was turned into a zombie. The actors recovered the Vril device for Ultimus, who were then teleported to their next destination. The fate of the cast and crew remained unknown, but 6 weeks later, Romero's assistant, Sally, was teleported to Shangri-La and trapped inside a time loop while looking through Romero's research about Group 935. As they continued their journey, Ultimus arrived at Shangri-La on April 25, 1956. With the help of two explorers trapped inside the time loop, Brock and Gary, Ultimus acquired the focusing stone. Now in possession of the Vril device and the focusing stone, Ultimus Richthofen was ready to return to the moon. Ultimus Dempsey, however, fired the 31-79 JGB-215 while inside the teleporter. This caused Ultimus to travel to the Pentagon before the November 6 outbreak had occurred. Meanwhile, Yuri was sent by Samantha to release the zombies kept in the Pentagon before being sent to November 6. Once in the Pentagon, Ultimus traveled to Groom Lake, Nevada, where they used the teleporter to reach the moon. Once inside Griffin Station, on October 13, 2025, Ultimus reactivated the MPD, which revealed Samantha as she was when she entered the device back in 1945. Ultimus Richthofen then used a terminal to power up the Vril device and merged it with the focusing stone. However, he encountered Maxis inside the terminal, who tried to stop him. However, Ultimus Richthofen was able to complete his grand scheme and switched his soul with that of Samantha's, gaining full control of the ether, while Samantha was trapped inside Richthofen's body. Ultimus Dempsey, Nikolai, and Takeo then decided to help the disembodied AI Maxis stop Ultimus Richthofen. They launched 3 missiles at the Earth in order to sever the link between the Earth and the ether. However, The calculations were made in haste, causing catastrophic destruction to the Earth. Meanwhile, in 2035, Victus was able to activate all three polarization devices in Maxis's favor. Maxis, now corrupted by the Dark Ether, returned to the moon in 2025 and plucked Samantha from Richtofan's body to join him in Agartha, before destroying the Earth and all its inhabitants. As a last bit of revenge, Maxis trapped Ultimus Richtofan's soul in a zombie, creating undead Richtofan, leaving his body in a catatonic state. Ultimus Dempsey, Takeo, Nikolai, and Richtofan's catatonic body were then accidentally teleported back to Groom Lake on August 3, 1963, where they were captured by Purnell and kept in Hangar 4 to be experimented on. Several months later, on October 13, undead Richtofan stepped out of a portal from the empty Earth and remerged his soul with Ultimus Richtofan's body, waking him from his coma. Some time later, Primus teleported inside Hangar 4 where they freed and met with their Ultimus selves. Nikolai, now assuming the role of leader of the group, revealed to Ultimus there will be a war to be fought, a great war, before teleporting away from the hangar. Victus story. The missile launched by the Ultimus crew in 2025 left the Earth as a post-apocalyptic crumbling wasteland, littered with undead hordes as civilization collapsed. As survivors began to band together to form small human communities and shelters to protect themselves from the now global undead threat, Maxis realized the failure of his original plans due to hasty calculations and began contacting survivors to help him with his plan B. Activate global polarization devices and open a gateway to Agartha, where he would overpower Richtofan and use its energy to heal the Earth. Unbeknownst to his followers, Maxis secretly planned to commandeer the Ether's energy for his own use to open the gateway to Agartha and reunite with Samantha, which would ultimately destroy the Earth and its people. Ultimus Richtofan, unsatisfied with his limited power over the undead, planned to activate these polarization devices as well, which would grant him further manipulation of both zombies and humans and mend the rift, a direct gateway to Agartha, which would eternally damn the soul of Samantha Maxis in the process. Limited to communication with only those capable of hearing the voices of the Ether, Ultimus Richtofan began his own quest for unlimited power. Over the years, Maxis's followers started constructing the first polarization device near the Hanford site in Green Run, Washington state. However, his followers began to doubt his goals and, believing him to be evil, proceeded to destroy the devices. Meanwhile, the Flesh, a society of survivors who ate the undead, was formed. As its members ate the flesh of the undead, they began to hear Ultimus Richtofan, who tried to persuade them to construct the polarization devices. Eventually a battle broke out between Maxis's followers and the Flesh, with only a few left to escape, as an undead horde descended upon them. Several years later, in 2035, Marlton Johnson, the sole survivor of the nuclear incident at Camp Edward and the missile strike, met with Abigail Misty Briarton in a diner near Green Run, where they also encountered two more survivors, Russman, a former Broken Arrow operative, and Samuel J. Stullinger, one of the remaining members of the Flesh, who used a stolen bus for transport. The four would become known as Victus, activating the polarization devices. At the Hanford site, Victus was contacted by Maxis, who revealed the town contains a polarization device required for his plans. At the same time, Ultimus Richtofan contacted Samuel, instructing him to foil Maxis's plans by activating the tower in his favor, beginning a race for power between Maxis and Ultimus Richtofan. Victus ultimately activated the tower for Maxis, consuming the essence of the entity called Avogadro. Victus was then teleported by Ultimus Richtofan to a skyscraper in the crumbled city of Shanghai, Province 22, China, in an attempt to gain control of the tower located there. Maxis also contacted Victus, hoping to convince them to give him control of the tower. Richtofan tried to blackmail Samuel into cooperating by threatening to reveal to his allies that he had consumed undead meat. Every time the group failed to carry out the objective and was killed by the zombie horde, Richtofan would use his power to bring them back, with no memories of their previous failures or deaths. Victus ultimately activated the second polarization device in Maxis's favor. Victus managed to escape the building they were trapped in and started to wander the world to reach the rift, hoping to find answers about the unseen forces commanding them. They traveled through the remains of Europe, crossed the Sahara Desert, and by December 31, 2035 found a western town buried underground near the rift in southern Angola. The town was transported from the 1800s to underneath the mining facility by a temporal rift triggered by the fracturing of the earth 10 years earlier. In one of the cells, Victus found Arthur, who had been transported to the town from 1318 by a previous temporal rift. Maxis once again contacted the survivors, imploring them to activate the last spire in his favor. Meanwhile, Samuel was tasked with the same objective by Ultimus Richthofen, as it was also the last tower he needed to mend the rift and gain unlimited power. Canon ending. Alternate ending. If the player decides to follow Maxis's Easter eggs in all 3 maps and polarize the towers in his favor, Maxis will gain control of the Ether and open a gateway to Agartha. He removes Samantha's soul from Richthofen's body back in 2025, and, as a last revenge against his former assistant, Maxis traps Ultimus Richthofen's soul inside a zombie whose eyes become blue, becoming undead Richthofen. He then travels to the house and reunites with his daughter Samantha. However, opening the portal to Agartha results in the destruction of the earth and its inhabitants. Samantha, after witnessing her father's corruption by the Dark Ether, reached out through a temporal rift to the Maxis of Dimension 63 for help. Alternate ending. If the player decides to follow Richthofen's Easter eggs in all 3 maps and polarize the towers in his favor, the rift will be mended, eternally damning Samantha to Agartha and allowing Richthofen to fully manipulate the Ether's energies. With the Earth as his personal playground and Maxis's existence erased, Richthofen is now able to leave the Ether at will and uses the body of Samuel Stullinger as his physical host. Retrieving the Chronorium. Following Maxis's victory, the Victus crew was contacted by Primus Richthofen and offered an escape portal from the soon-to-be-destroyed Earth. Primus Richthofen had discovered his connection with Samuel Stullinger shortly after the events of Origins in Dimension 63 and had decided to use Victus to acquire the Chronorium, a book needed for his plan to find the summoning key. Primus Richthofen also instructed Undead Richthofen, Ultimus, to pursue Victus and recover their blood vials. The escape portal led Victus to an abandoned Broken Arrow facility which Russman had previously worked at. There, they recovered a fragment of the elemental shard before providing blood samples which transported them to Empty Earth, still being chased by Undead Richthofen. Escaping the zombie horde led by Undead Richthofen, they arrived at Zero Base, a facility created by some version of Maxis in the Empty Earth. While some of Victus felt that they were finally safe in Zero Base, Primus Richthofen informed Stullinger that the Empty Earth was a tangential world which would soon collapse due to their intrusion. Their only way out would be to recover the Chronorium stored within the base. After taking possession of the Chronorium, they departed through another rift, while Undead Richthofen collected the blood samples they had left behind. Victus arrived inside Richthofen's lab beneath Alcatraz in Dimension 63, where they met with Primus Richthofen. Upon reading the Chronorium, Primus Richthofen discovered numerous timelines documenting their fates and learned about the blood vials. He would later write on the page, "One know now what I must do." ER 4741. He then left his lab and collected Victus's blood samples from Undead Richthofen in the Empty Earth, retrieved the blood samples of Salvador Sal de Luca 386A and Michael Finn O'Leary 481B in 1934, then gave the prisoner's blood samples to his younger self in 1914. Primus Richthofen then returned to the lab. He then offered to put Victus on ice inside suspension devices, where they would be kept safe until the final world arrives, which Victus accepted. Shortly after being placed in stasis, the Primus crew from the future teleported to the lab, and Primus Richthofen gave the later version of himself the Victus blood samples. Primus story. In Dimension 63, in 1300, Sir Pablo Marinus, who had been transported back in time from the pocket dimension by Victus, began documenting the Great War, including everything he had learned about the Keepers, the Apothecans, and Element 115. Regarding Element 115's power, he noted that a site in northern France contained massive deposits of the element. In northern France, a tomb was constructed to honor the fallen soldiers of the Great War. Within it, statues of Primus were constructed to symbolize the hope that if one day a great evil falls upon mankind, they may return. Several centuries later, Dr. Ludwig Maxis and Dr. Edward Richthofen, who would later be known as Primus Richthofen, joined Group 935. In 1914, Primus Richthofen was visited by an older version of himself who handed him 2 blood vials and explained that he would need this blood, and, when the time came, they would protect him. The older version of Primus Richthofen then left through a rift. In 1916, Group 935 discovered the journal of Sir Pablo Marinus. Using information gathered from the journal, Group 935 began work at a dig site in northern France, where they discovered a series of underground tombs. They struggled to gain access of the tomb's main chamber until the entrance unexpectedly opened when soldiers listened to a recording of La Source Noire. The camp's exposure to element 115 began soon after. In 1917, Group 935 experimented with element 115, dubbed divinium by Maxis, and successfully created localized energy fields, which appeared to function as portals. Maxis noted that objects could pass through them and speculated the rifts may have opened gateways across space and time. After witnessing the corruption of her father by the Dark Ether in the house, Samantha reached out to the Dimension 63 Maxis through the rifts Group 935 had opened. She begged for his help and revealed she was his daughter. Group 935 continued experimenting with element 115 in the rifts. One day an ancient box arrived through one of the portals. The box had the power to manifest weapons from different eras. Maxis feared element 115 was disrupting the space-time continuum. Following the installation of element 115 power generators, reports surfaced of ancient figures emerging from the dig site, corresponding with the mysterious deaths of several Group 935 soldiers. Using element 115, Group 935 later constructed 4 giant robots, including 3 named Freya, Odin and Thor. Primus Richthofen noted that despite Group 935's progress at the dig site, he was troubled by Maxis's growing obsession with Sir Pablo Marinis's diary. Meanwhile, Primus Tank Dempsey, Nikolai Belinsky, Takeo Misaki, were dispatched by their respective governments to gather intel and investigate on Group 935's weapon technology and capabilities. By 1918, Maxis had become obsessed with Samantha, who spoke to him constantly. He believed her to be the key to everything and eventually swore to no longer serve Group 935's mission. On June 4, 1918, Element 115 awakened the undead knights from the Great War, who quickly consumed the camp. Maxis was rendered catatonic by the element, but Primus Richthofen was able to remove his brain before he turned. Primus Dempsey, Nikolai, and Takeo united with Primus Richthofen on the battlefield, put Maxis's brain in a drone, and helped free Samantha from her imprisonment in Agartha. Maxis's brain followed her to Agartha. When Maxis's brain arrived in the house in Agartha, Dr. Monty decided to step in and, despite the absence of his soul, recreated a physical manifestation of Maxis's Dimension 63 form. Monty then erased the original timeline's Dark Ether, corrupted Maxis from existence. After cleansing the remaining corruption from Samantha, Monty united her with the Dimension 63 incarnation of her father and Fluffy. At this point, Monty revealed to Maxis his plan to resolve the paradox wrought by a multiverse and create a new reality, one free of the apothecans, but it would only work if they enlisted the aid of souls who had lived through and survived the fracturing. Samantha sent Primus to the Ultimus dimension in 1943, where they formulated a plan to stop Ultimus Richthofen and prevent the events that were about to unfold. Richthofen's journey. Primus Richthofen alone was teleported to the house in Agartha and reunited with Maxis. Maxis explained to Primus Richthofen the plan to secure the chronorium and locate the summoning key, and warned him that the test subjects must never be allowed to be awakened. While inside the house, Primus Richthofen discovered his connection with Samuel Stullinger and decided to use Victus to acquire the chronorium. Primus Richthofen traveled back to 1940 in Dimension 63, where he contacted members of the Illuminati and enlisted their help to build a laboratory facility beneath Alcatraz. Several days later, he met with Stanley Ferguson and convinced him to assist with the Illuminati's construction of the Alcatraz laboratory. Having overseen the construction of a laboratory beneath Alcatraz, Richthofen returned to the house in Agartha, where he began to communicate with Stullinger. Together, they persuaded Victus to travel to a variety of locations in order to recover the chronorium. When Primus Richthofen returned to the laboratory in 1941, he transported Victus to the lab to meet them. Upon reading the chronorium, Primus Richthofen discovered numerous timelines documenting their fates and learned about the blood vials. He would later write on the page, "One know now what I must do." ER 4741. He then left his lab and collected Victus's blood samples from undead Richthofen in the empty earth, retrieved the blood samples of Salvador Sal de Luca and Michael Finn O'Leary in 1934, and gave the latter two to his younger self in 1914. Primus Richthofen returned to the lab and offered to put Victus on ice inside suspension devices, where they would be kept safe until the final world arrives. Shortly after putting Victus in stasis, the rest of the Primus team arrived in the lab from the Protestant fracture, and Primus Richthofen gave them Victus's blood samples. Following their departure, Primus Richthofen learned the location of the summoning key and traveled to Morgue City. There he learned that the reporter had the summoning key and confronted him. The reporter, who had been warned by Monty's letter not to give the summoning key to anyone, ordered Richthofen to stay away before attacking him. Primus Richthofen killed the reporter in self-defense, but was unable to retrieve the artifact, as the crate containing the summoning key had been sealed with ancient magic. In Morgue City, 4 individuals with checkered pasts, Floyd Campbell, Jessica Rose, Nero Blackstone, and Jack Vincent, were influenced by the Shadowman to kill someone they knew. They were then drugged and, upon waking, were manipulated into conducting a ritual, thinking it would absolve them of their sins. Instead, it allowed the Apothecans into Dimension 63. After realizing their mistake, the 4 worked with the Keepers to defeat the Shadowman and trapped him inside the summoning key. Primus Richthofen returned to Morgue City and stole the summoning key, with the Shadowman trapped within it, from the 4 before leaving the dimension. Primus Richthofen then traveled to Dimension 2210, where he secured the soul of a young innocent. Returning to the house, Monty was able to give the innocent soul a physical form, named Eddie. He also took custody of the summoning key, though the Shadowman ominously promised, "I'll be seeing you," foreshadowing his planned escape. Primus Richthofen then returned to the Ultimus dimension, where he stepped out of a teleporter moments after Ultimus Richthofen had teleported Maxis and Samantha away and killed his Ultimus self, triggering fractures across space and time. Shadowman's plan. The Shadowman was the only Apothecan to survive the banishment in the Dark Ether and traveled across the multiverse to find a way for the other Apothecans to reach Agartha. Posing as Mr. Rapt, the Shadowman hired the same reporter across different dimensions to retrieve the summoning key, as well as components for the Agarthan device. After learning the fate of Salvador Sal DeLuca, Billy Handsome, Albert Weasel Arlington and Michael Finn O'Leary in Dimension 63, the Shadowman contacted the Warden of Alcatraz during the 1930s and corrupted him. In 1932, Salvador DeLuca, Billy Handsome, Albert Arlington, and Michael O'Leary were convicted and sent to Alcatraz. The next year, on April 1, 1933, Arlington convinced the other 3 that they could build a plane and escape the island. By the end of year, however, the others realized the plane would never be completed. Embittered, they plotted to get revenge on Arlington. On December 31, 1933, DeLuca, O'Leary, and Finn lured Arlington to the roof and killed him. The Shadowman revealed to the Warden that he would transform the island with the souls of the 4 mobsters and create a trap to ensnare Primus Richthofen inside a pocket dimension. In January 1934, just a few days before they were executed, Primus Richthofen stepped through a portal and secured the blood samples of DeLuca and O'Leary. On January 19, 1934, Salvador DeLuca, Billy Handsome and Michael O'Leary were executed by electric chair for the murder of Arlington. After their execution, the Warden killed himself with the electric chair before disappearing from Dimension 63. In late 1943, the reporter recovered the summoning key in the South Pacific, the Seal of Duality, as well as a rock of element 115 in Russia. He then interviewed Stanley Ferguson, a retired guard who worked at the Alcatraz prison between 1933 and 1941. Ferguson gave the reporter a detailed account of the death of 4 mobsters and their plan to escape the rock. After learning their fate, the Shadowman went into the past and contacted the Warden of Alcatraz in the 1930s. On December 31, 1943, the reporter arrived in Morgue City, as requested by the Shadowman, to track down Floyd Campbell, Jessica Rose, Nero Blackstone and Jack Vincent. Over the next few months, the reporter gathered enough information and sent a telegram providing their details. The Shadowman then influenced Campbell, Rose, Blackstone, and Vincent to kill someone they knew. Aware of the Shadowman's actions, Monty wrote to the reporter, warning him to not give the summoning key to anyone. On April 21, 1944, Primus Richthofen arrived in Morgue City. The next day, he learned that the reporter had the summoning key and confronted him. The reporter waived Monty's letter to Richthofen and ordered him to stay away before attacking him. Primus Richthofen killed the reporter in self-defense, but was unable to retrieve the artifact, as the crate containing the summoning key had been sealed with ancient magic. Several days later, Floyd Campbell, Jessica Rose, Nero Blackstone and Jack Vincent awakened in a twisted version of Morgue City. The Shadowman tricked them into performing rituals which gave the Apothecans access to Dimension 63. After realizing their error, the 4 then worked with the Keepers to defeat the Shadowman and trapped him inside the summoning key. At this point, Primus Richthofen stepped through a portal, stole the summoning key, and thanked the 4 for their efforts before leaving the dimension. The next day, the Apothecans consumed Dimension 63 and its inhabitants. Inside the summoning key, the Shadowman contacted the Warden of Alcatraz and revealed to him that he would transform Alcatraz with the souls of the 4 mobsters and create a trap to ensnare Primus Richthofen inside the pocket dimension, thus creating a cycle. Quest for the souls. In the Ultimus dimension, Primus Dempsey, Takeo, and Nikolai were teleported in by Samantha and arrived at the Der Reis facility moments after Ultimus Richthofen teleported Maxis and Samantha away. They ordered Ultimus Richthofen to awaken the test subjects, Ultimus Dempsey, Nikolai, and Takeo, who had been kept in stasis prior to the outbreak at Der Reis in the original timeline. At this point, the teleporter activated and Primus Richthofen, now in possession of the summoning key, emerged and killed Ultimus Richthofen, then collected his soul within the summoning key, triggering fractures across space and time. Now inside the Deceptio fracture, Primus lit up a beacon within the facility, enabling Maxis to know where and when they were. Using a giant robot at Der Reis, Primus pursued a Group 935 truck carrying a cryostasis pod containing Ultimus Dempsey. The robot, however, was shot down by the soldiers, forcing Primus to continue on foot. They reached a gondola station, which took them up to Eagle's Nest. However, they were too late to stop Ultimus Dempsey from being launched on a rocket toward Griffin Station. As they carried on with their mission, Primus Richthofen posed as his Ultimus self to fool Dr. Groff, though the latter gradually became suspicious of Richthofen's abnormal behavior. Eventually, Primus redirected the rocket containing Ultimus Dempsey's pod to hit the castle courtyard. In retaliation, Groff activated a failsafe, preventing them from tampering with the pod. Primus used the Vril device from the cryopod to conjure up the spirit of a keeper. The keeper then teleported the MPD from Griffin Station to the castle, but became corrupted by the Dark Ether in the process, forcing Primus to defeat it. Primus then used the summoning key to activate the MPD and launch dozens of V2 rockets toward the moon, destroying it along with all Group 935 members within Griffin Station. As they approached Ultimus Dempsey's pod, Richthofen revealed his plan to eliminate their Ultimus counterparts and preserve their souls inside the summoning key. Dempsey, though initially resentful of the idea, agreed to the plan and took it upon himself to disable the pod's life support system, ending the life of Ultimus Dempsey. As he died, Primus Richthofen used the summoning key to capture and preserve his soul. With the death of Ultimus Dempsey, their goal at Griffin Castle was completed. Primus then teleported to the Protestant fracture, where they were taken hostage on board a Japanese ship in the Pacific Ocean. While a Japanese officer was interrogating them about the summoning key, a massive wave struck the ship, sending everyone off their balance. A brief fight then ensued, and the officer dropped the artifact. Primus then jumped overboard as the ship exploded and swam to a nearby island, where they found a Division 9 facility. Primus discovered deep inside the facility of Giant Thrasher, locked within a cell, which was revealed to be Ultimus Takeo, who was being experimented on. Ultimus Takeo revealed to Primus Takeo that it was the Emperor himself who had ordered Division 9 to torture and experiment on him. Primus Takeo offered his Ultimus self a chance to right the wrongs of the universe, which he accepted. Ultimus Takeo committed seppuku, with Primus Takeo acting as his Kashakunin. With his death, Primus Richthofen was able to secure the soul of Ultimus Takeo inside the summoning key. Primus then teleported to Primus Richthofen's laboratory beneath Alcatraz, where they met with an earlier version of Primus Richthofen before he acquired the summoning key. The earlier Primus Richthofen gave them the blood samples of Victus, and Primus stepped through a portal to their next destination. Primus accidentally teleported over the city of Stalingrad and the Agonia fracture. During the freefall, they grabbed onto the corpse of Peter McCain, who had gone through a portal and activated his parachute to land safely. They discovered an ongoing battle between dragons and Russian giant robots, with Ultimus Nikolai as the sole survivor fighting zombies inside a Manticore mech. Upon noticing Primus, Ultimus Nikolai attempted to kill them, but was thrown into a building by a dragon before he could succeed. He later questioned who they were and if they could help him. Eventually, Primus reached SOPHIA, an AI made from the brain of Maxis's assistant Sophia, who had been attacked by a zombie during their stay at the Kino facility. She asked them to perform several tasks before a master password could be typed in, prompting Primus to complete the Ascension Protocol. As they continued to follow SOPHIA's instructions, they found Jersh, who recognized them, yet knew they were not the same versions who freed him. Primus tricked Jersh into entering the systems of SOPHIA to extract information from him, leading to his destruction. With the Ascension Protocol completed, SOPHIA flew away through space and time in hopes of finding Maxis. During their mission at Stalingrad, Monty contacted Primus stating he had seen their misdeeds and asked them to fix the universe, as they were partially responsible for its fracture. Primus then reached Ultimus Nikolai, who made a temporary truce with them to kill the dragon. However, upon the dragon's death, Primus asked Ultimus Nikolai to surrender. Ultimus Nikolai refused, and a brief fight broke out between them. Ultimately, Primus defeated Ultimus Nikolai, who was then approached by his Primus self. As he approached, Ultimus Nikolai asked if he would kill him now. Primus Nikolai apologized, stating he wished there was another way, and remarked he was suffering the same pain. He explained that Ultimus Nikolai turned to alcohol to hide agonizing memories of his wife's death during an air raid. In a fit of rage, Ultimus Nikolai fired upon his Primus self. However, the shot hit Primus Nikolai on his armored plate, causing no damage. In retaliation, Primus Nikolai responded by killing his Ultimus self, allowing Richthofen to secure his soul. With all the souls collected, Primus Richthofen sent them to the house in Agartha, where Monty turned them into children. When the souls arrived in the house, Maxis told Samantha and Eddie to put their toys away before coming down to the basement, creating a paradox. At some point, Maxis became overwhelmed by the voice of the Shadowman, begging for his help from within the summoning key. When Maxis took the artifact, he released the Shadowman and became trapped inside the summoning key himself. Once outside the house, the Shadowman opened a gateway for the Apothecans, fracturing and corrupting Agartha, and revealing the Apothecan son. Primus fought the Apothecans and the Shadowman. During the battle, Sophia arrived in Agartha. Using the summoning key and the Chronorium, Primus defeated the Shadowman with the help of Sophia Maxis, still inside the summoning key, and Sophia then plunged inside the Apothecan son, destroying the Apothecans and purging element 115 from the final universe. After the battle, Monty realized Primus drank the blood from their blood vials, blood coming from realities already closed off. This prevented Primus from fading out of existence and resulted in a paradox. As Monty was looking for a way to get rid of Primus Richthofen suggested he send them somewhere none of their other selves had ever been to. As a result, Primus was sent back to 1294. Where they saved Pablo Marinus during the Great War between humanity and the Apothecans, ultimately creating a loop in time, breaking the cycle. The Great War. When Pablo Marinus arrived in northern France in 1294, having been transported from the pocket dimension in Siberia, he fought alongside the Wolf King. He was saved from Amargua by Primus Richthofen after the Primus crew had been sent to the Great War by Monty. At this point, Primus Richthofen realized that Monty was lying about securing a better tomorrow. He realized that going to the Great War wouldn't break the cycle, as it was the end of their loop. Primus Richthofen finally understood that Monty wasn't inherently evil. He was trying to survive by saving the multiverse the only way he knew how. By fulfilling the prophecy of the cycle, Primus Richthofen and Dr. Monty had forged an endless loop. With the help of Pablo Marinus, Primus Richthofen started a plan to break the cycle. As Pablo Marinus was defending him from the zombies, Primus Richthofen powered up a teleportation device to travel to the Alcatraz pocket dimension. Before he left, Pablo gave him the elemental gem from the Staff of Fire. Primus Richthofen would then be known as Post-Great War Richthofen, Alcatraz pocket dimension. After their deaths, Salvador Sal de Luca, Billy Handsome, Albert Weasel Arlington and Michael Finn O'Leary were trapped inside a perpetual cycle in the Alcatraz pocket dimension, created by the Warden for the Shadowman. The four mobsters began their escape plan before realizing they weren't in the prison. While fighting off the zombies and the Warden, they constructed a plane based on Arlington design, before taking off and crashing against the Golden Gate Bridge. The cycle continues. The cycle is broken. If Salvador De Luca, Billy Handsome and Michael O'Leary kill Albert Arlington on the Golden Gate, the cycle continues, with the mobsters dying and returning to Alcatraz, and only Arlington having any memory of what happened before. The cycle is broken. If Arlington successfully kills Salvador De Luca, Billy Handsome and Michael O'Leary on the Golden Gate, the cycle is broken. This allows the mobsters to escape their cycle and free their spirits from their bodies. With their cycle now broken, the four mobsters will help Primus escaping the pocket dimension. Upon arriving from the Protestant fracture, another iteration of Primus arrived in the Alcatraz pocket dimension, farther from their destination than they intended, and made their way to a laboratory on the west side of the island. In the laboratory, they found the earlier version of Primus Richthofen, before his journey to Morgue City, reading the Chronorium. As he waited for them to arrive, the lone Richthofen stated they were late before giving them the blood vials. He then strongly advised Primus Richthofen read the Chronorium again before he left via his own portal. Upon reading it, Primus Richthofen realized the pages had changed. Primus traveled through the cell blocks while fending off zombies to escape through another rift. However, this was prevented by the Warden who destroyed the rift before Primus could leave. Primus Richthofen then realized they were now trapped inside the Alcatraz pocket dimension, as the Shadowman had intended. While exploring Alcatraz, Primus Richthofen began hearing Samuel J. Stollinger inside his head and realized the lighthouse must have triggered a chain reaction in the ether. Primus also discovered the Warden's inner sanctum, where they found the Warden's body attached to an electric chair. As they were retrieving the chronorium, Arlington, now in the form of a seagull, stole the book. After recovering it, Primus placed it on the Warden's body. Using the chronorium, Primus helped several spirits trapped inside the dimension before placing the summoning key inside the Warden's body to be used as conduit to his soul. This resulted in the partial destruction of the lighthouse, which fired a red beam of light towards the sky and prompted the Warden to attack Primus, stating they now belonged to him before knocking them out and locking each of them in a cell. The Warden explained to Primus that they would be trapped in the pocket dimension forever, suffering with their blood extracted by his machine, as it was the key to keep the gateway opened, and also freed the Shadowmen and the Apothecans. However, after the Warden left, Arlington arrived and helped Primus escape their cells. As they ran back to the lab, they were stopped by the Warden, who turned into a giant version of himself. He was, however, restrained by the spirits of Salvador De Luca, Billy Handsome and Finn O'Leary, who launched him into the sky. Inside the lab, another cryopod was revealed and Primus started its thawing sequence. Primus then confronted the Warden in front of the dark mechanism next to the model industries to prevent him from acquiring the last piece of the mechanism. During the fight, Primus Richthofen decided to step inside the dark mechanism and gave his blood. In the meantime, the cryopod opened, revealing post-Great War Richthofen wearing chainmail and holding the elemental gem. He joined the fight and used the gem to kill the Warden and the zombies, freeing their spirits from the pocket dimension. Post-Great War Richthofen revealed to Primus Nikolai that the future had changed and handed him the chronorium, advising him to read it. He explained to Primus Nikolai that he must keep his soul in order to defeat Monty, to which Primus Nikolai replied, "Who?" Several portals appeared, and post-Great War Richthofen moved to the dark mechanism, where he revealed to Primus Richthofen that the cycle was now broken and that their insurance policies, the blood vials, were no longer needed. He grabbed the summoning key and joined Primus, who had smashed their blood vials, before stepping through the portals, leaving Primus Richthofen to die. As the pocket dimension was collapsing, Nikolai's grand scheme. After leaving Alcatraz, Primus Nikolai, now assuming the role of leader, Dempsey, Takeo, and post-Great War Richthofen, teleported into Hangar 4 at Groom Lake in 1963, where they met and freed their captured Ultimus selves, including the post-merge of the catatonic and undead Richthofen. Primus Nikolai revealed to them that there would be a war to be fought, the Great War, before teleporting away from the hangar. Acquiring the elemental shard, Primus and Ultimus then arrived at Camp Edward, Nevada on October 13, 2025. They reactivated the facility and its AI Rushmore. The elemental shard to proceed was locked inside the American Pyramid device, and Rushmore tested them before granting them access to it. During their exploration, they found Peter McCain trapped inside an android. With the help of Rushmore, who deemed Peter someone very important to humanity's future, Primus and Ultimus transferred him to an elemental orb, which then flew away from Camp Edward. When they opened the pyramid, they released Cornelius Purnell, who had been transformed by the shard into the monstrous entity Avogadro. With the release of Avogadro, a nuke was detonated but was ineffective. They managed to contain Avogadro inside the APD long enough for Rushmore to transfer it to the Hanford site. After they retrieved the shard, Maxis contacted them saying it was too late. Maxis then teleported Samantha and Eddie away from the house before being devoured by Monty. When Samantha arrived at Camp Edward, she unleashed her fury, causing tremendous damage to Camp Edward, before stating to Eddie that they would fight the Great War, kill Monty and burn the house to the ground, resolving the paradox. After their journey to Camp Edward, Primus and Ultimus, accompanied with Samantha and Eddie, settled down in a forest. They proceeded to celebrate their future victory around a campfire, drinking and eating. Primus Nikolai explained to them that the Great War, the Apothecans, the Keepers, the Dark Ether, the Shadowmen and Monty, are just legend and tales from the chronorium. He revealed both the Shadowmen and Monty became corrupted by the Dark Ether, one from his own ambition, and the other trying desperately to save his friend. He revealed the greatest war was the war they were fighting against themselves. As they keep celebrating, Primus Nikolai told them to think about what they desired, where they would like to go. Unbeknownst to them, the members of Primus and Ultimus had their drinks poisoned by Primus Nikolai. All of them, save for Primus Nikolai, Ultimus Richthofen, Samantha, and Eddie, die to help resolve the paradox. With Primus Richthofen's death, Ultimus Richthofen reverted to Undead Richthofen. Undead Richthofen then contacted Victus, who exited their cryogenic pods and stepped through a portal before the Alcatraz pocket dimension collapsed. Victus arrived in the abandoned Group 935 Siberian facility of a different pocket dimension and was instructed by Undead Richthofen to build an Agartha device. In the facility, they encountered Pablo Marinas, who had survived the operation performed by Ultimus Richthofen in 1945 and had been living inside the facility as a hermit for 20 years. Pablo Marinas told Victus he could build the Agarthan device for them. Victus recovered the Vril vessel inside the facility, as well as the blood of an apothecon inside the stranded Ascension Group ship. They also retrieved the elemental shards sent by Primus Nikolai and gave them to Pablo Marinas. When the Agarthan device was completed, the presence of the apothecon blood caused the species of apothecons and keepers to reunite as one, resolving the duality that existed between the species. As Victus activated the Agarthan device, it started to evolve, affecting all the element 115 in the area. Primus Nikolai tasked Victus to stay close to the device and to protect it until it reached its final state. Once charged, Victus returned the Agarthan device to Pablo Marinas, who used it to create a portal in order to go to the Great War and help Primus Richthofen in breaking the cycle. Victus then retrieved the device and sent it to Primus Nikolai. Using the Agarthan device, Primus Nikolai destroyed the summoning key to open the way through, before killing Undead Richthofen. With the destruction of the summoning key, reality collapsed, and the entirety of creation started to fade away, including Victus, the zombies, the apothecons, element 115 and Monty himself. Everything that spewed forth from the ether was banished to where they belonged, the dark ether. Primus Nikolai then asked Samantha to kill him. With the death of Primus and Ultimus, the paradox was resolved. As the multiverse faded away, Samantha and Eddie walked towards the light and into the new universe and a better tomorrow. Dark Ether Saga. Distant past. Life in the Dark Ether. For eons, clans of powerful beings, known as Elder Gods or Old Ones, have been forging alliances and fighting battles with one another in a constant struggle for power in the Dark Ether. One of the most powerful of these beings was Cortifex the Deathless, who, as a member of his clan's royal bloodline, murdered his parents to rule over his clan. Cortifex took Syraxis, another member of the royal bloodline, as his consort. One day, Cortifex petitioned the construct, a living monolith of immense power. No one in the Dark Ether knew where the construct came from, but it was believed to be ancient, even by the standards of the Elder Gods, often being described as old as time itself. Although the first denizens of the Dark Ether worshipped it, the construct appeared to be indifferent to their lives and struggles. However, on a few occasions, the construct would give a small fraction of its powers to an individual it deemed worthy to become its champion and archon. Even though Cortifex completed the 3 trials that were set up for him, the trial of sacrifice, the trial of mindfulness, and the trial of resilience, the construct rejected his petition. Enraged, Cortifex became obsessed with becoming the new archon and prevented anyone from petitioning the construct by sending the Sisters of Agony, his personal assassins, against any individual who would try. For a time, Cortifex deeply cared about Syraxis, until she bore him an heir and tried to hide it. Worried that his child would one day turn against him like he did with his parents, Cortifex cruelly got rid of the child. As punishment, Cortifex maimed Syraxis, burying her face beneath a mask and wiping out her memory, now called the Shadow. As she had become a shadow of her former self, Syraxis became one of the Sisters of Agony. First contact with humanity. Following the banishment of the multiverse, some Elder Gods became aware of the existence of life outside of the Dark Ether, with many items now appearing throughout the realms, including a mysterious weapon box and a pack-a-punch device. Many of them began taking interest with Earth and its inhabitants, including Cortifex, who ordered Nordicus the Conqueror, the supreme commander of Cortifex's Night Legions, to study the planet for conquest. However, they could only see glimpses of the other side through the newly formed dimensional veil, often appearing to humans in campfires, crystal balls, or pools of water. The possibility to cross over became possible thanks to Syraxis, who, having studied humanity since even before the rise of farming and trade, helped Belliker the Warlock into creating an anchor that formed a transdimensional link between the two realities, allowing her to make a symbiotic bond with a human host. These anchors became known as artifacts. The other Elder Gods began creating artifacts of their own, each reflecting the culture they were the most familiar with. Cortifex often visited the Egyptians, who believed he was Osiris, and his artifact took the form of a stick with a pyramid on each end. Cortifex later bonded with a cruel pharaoh who saw himself as a god. Nordicus was revered by the Norsemen as Ymir, the father of the Frost Giants, and his artifact took the form of a horn. Invictor the Destroyer, a veteran soldier of the Night Legion, appreciated Greek warriors who believed he was the god of war Ares, and his artifact took the form of a sword. At some point, Invictor bonded with a man named Achilles who accomplished many feats and became a legend, leading Invictor to also be erroneously remembered as Achilles. Belliker was always fascinated and curious about humanity, especially the Mayans, and her artifact took the form of a mask. Syraxis, on the other hand, always saw humans as playthings, bonding with anyone she could for centuries in Japan, where she was believed to be a Kitsunetsuki. Her artifact took the form of a three-headed dragon, the Netherwars. To increase his dominion as Lord of the Dark Ether, Cortifex and his Night Legions waged the Netherwars against rival clans. However, some in Cortifex's circle began working against him, including Belliker, who chronicled the campaigns of the Netherwars, and Syraxis, who fled from the Sisters of Agony, forcing Cortifex to replace her with Zabala the Deceiver. During one campaign, the Night Legions battled in the wilds of the Dark Ether, ravaging the land where a hermit clan dwelled. The clan had control over life energy by communing with the web of life that spread throughout the wilds, connecting each member with one another. With their land turning into a wasteland, thus diminishing the web of life, the clan pleaded Cortifex to spare the wilds. Aghast by the request, Cortifex burnt the clan's sacred forest and, unaware of the clan's power, launched his armies and the Sisters of Agony to hunt down every member of the clan. With each death, the hermit clan's energy and power were passed down to another until only one member remained, Vercana the Last. With the accumulated power of her now extinct clan, Vercana was said to have become invincible. Not long after, as Cortifex continued to expand his territory, Belliker met with Vercana in front of Vercana's birthstone, in what was now the corrupted lands of the Dark Ether, to form a plot against Cortifex. The other clans began to organize and repel the Night Legions. It was the first defeat suffered by Cortifex's armies for as long as people remembered. Enraged, Cortifex singled out one of the commanders, known as the Decimator, merging him into his own shield for eternity, before throwing it away in what remained of the wilds to be forgotten. However, the noose continued to tighten around Cortifex, as his armies were suffering defeat after defeat. After the Battle of Obsidian Ridge, Invictor defected to the resistance. Realizing victory could not be achieved, as well as harboring feelings of guilt and remorse, Nordicus also joined the rebellious clans and helped topple Cortifex's throne. As a punishment, Cortifex was physically trapped into his scepter before being cast out on Earth. Cortifex swore vengeance on the treacherous elder gods' influence over Earth. Over time, Syraxis, Belliker, Nordicus, and Invictor also became trapped in their own artifact-turned-prison, separated from the rest of the Dark Ether. This did not stop the Elder Gods from interacting or having influence over Earth. Syraxis continued to visit Japan and bond with many people, until she bonded with a feudal lord on the island of Okinawa during the 18th century. Unbeknownst to her, Cortifex secretly contacted the keepers of a small shrine dedicated to her and convinced them that she was a threat to their lord. He forged a relic mirror and taught them how to separate Syraxis from her host. When she returned to the shrine, Syraxis was ambushed by the priests who used the mirror to force her back into her artifact before it was discarded. In medieval Europe, the Société Occulte was formed by several individuals who often came in contact with the Elder Gods, including Cortifex and Nordicus. Over centuries, this secret society wrote and compiled a spell book of Dark Ether rune magic they called the Tome of Rituals, which could only be read by the society's inner circle. As time went by, the members of the Société Occulte became the wealthiest and most powerful people in Europe. To maintain their secrecy, they never met at the same place until one day a senior member of the society, an architect and Freemason named Lucien Poiret, designed a mystic fortress for the Society Hotel Royal. The fortress was built on top of the Paris catacombs, which were laid out in a Dark Ether rune magic pattern, creating a dimensional nexus. Within Hotel Royal, the Société performed seances and rituals using the Tome of Rituals, calling upon the various entities to help them increase their wealth and influence. However, a crisis occurred during the 1920s, leading the Société to disappear, and the Tome of Rituals to be torn apart, with its pages hidden in sacred places around the world by entrusted members. At some point, for unknown reasons, the connection between Earth and the Dark Ether was completely severed, turning the artifacts into inert relics forgotten by humanity. World War II. Uncovering the past. As the Nazis gained power in Germany, many of its members turned to mysticism and occultism, like Heinrich Himmler and the Ahnenerbe. As the head of the Schutzstaffel, Himmler was particularly interested in proving the existence of the so-called Aryan master race, establishing Kampfgruppe Die Wahrheit, the Truth, a battalion led by SS Oberfuhrer Wolfram von List, to raid and plunder antiquities around the world. At the beginning of the war, in early September 1939, Wolfram von List arrived at the office of Professor Gabriel Kraft, a demonologist at the University of Leipzig. Kraft was translating an ancient Sumerian scroll with the help of his assistant, Franz, when von List ordered him to leave the university and joined Iwarit as an advisor. After Kraft refused, von List killed Franz to make him cooperate. Kraft was sent to a SS prison with other explorers, historians, and archaeologists. Von List soon ordered them to help Iwarit find places and relics such as the Grail, Thor's hammer, Atlantis, and Shangri-La. While most obeyed, regardless of whether or not the places or relics really existed, Kraft defied von List. Soon after, the SS broke into Kraft's home and arrested his spouse Sasha. With no choice left, Kraft agreed to help von List, who would give him letters from his spouse to keep him in line, but made a secret promise to himself to use any findings against the Nazis. Kraft's first assignment was to decipher documents seized at Hotel Royal, the infamous fortress of the Société Occulte. He soon realized the documents were pages from the Tome of Rituals and was tasked to track down more pages. He recognized the handwriting of notes in the margins of some pages, which belonged to one of the patrons of the University of Leipzig. Von List had the patron arrested and tortured, revealing he was a member of the Société, entrusted with hiding the tome pages and listing others who possessed some pages. As more pages were acquired, Kraft deduced the locations of the 5 artifacts that were mentioned in the tome. Over the years, several expeditions were launched around the globe to recover the artifacts, notably in Yucatan, the island of Okinawa in Japan, Iceland, Greece, and Egypt's eastern desert, where a lost temple dedicated to Osiris was found. While the artifacts appeared alien and anachronistic, they had little to no use in advancing the Nazis' racial agenda. Nonetheless, von List kept them by his side. Project Endstation. As the war drew to a close, the Nazis were desperate to win the war by any means, with several programs dedicated to ensuring a victory for the Reich. One such program was the Uranverein, the Nazi program dedicated to atomic research and uranium enrichment. During summer 1943, Kurt Diebner, the head of Uranverein, approved Project Endstation, Project Terminus, which proposed a massive particle accelerator and collider called cyclotron, designed by Drs. Ulrich Vogel and Lucas Kurtz, and funded by the former. The site was located in Morasko, a wooded area in the Reich district of Danzig, West Prussia in Nazi-occupied Poland. The incident. On March 7, 1944, at 10:03 p.m., Vogel and Kurtz performed the 12th test of the cyclotron. During the process, the particle accelerator malfunctioned and opened a rift between their world and the dark ether, unknowingly breaching the dimensional membrane between the two realms, once again reconnecting them. Creatures started coming through the gateway, and men close to the collider began to necrotize and turn into zombies. The small outbreak was contained, but the cyclotron was now operating on its own without an external source of power. Exo-Element 1 studies. Over the course of the next few days, Vogel studied the fallen soldiers to find a way to reverse their condition. The discovery and study of the rift was also seen with great interest by Adolf Hitler and the German High Command. On March 16, they were able to isolate an exotic and unknown element they classified as Exo-Element 1, which would later be dubbed Etherium. Vogel started working on a decontamination chamber designed to reverse the condition of the fallen soldiers and restore their brain activity. He believed that if they could control the process of necrotization, they could weaponize it and create an army of undead soldiers to save the Reich. On April 3, the decontamination chamber was complete and was nicknamed Der Wechseler by Kurtz. The chamber was able to remove the Exo-Element 1 from the brains of the undead soldiers, restoring some higher functions and reducing the violent outbursts, but not enough to bring them back to a state before the contamination. With the loss of Normandy, Hitler turned his attention once again to Endstation and, by August 1944, tasked Vogel to weaponize all their findings. Vogel continued to work on his idea of an army of soldiers who could rise up after being killed. A wonder weapon was also created from an Exo-Element 1 collector, the decompressive isotopic estrangement machine. At some point in late 1944, a new Endstation facility was established beneath Berlin, including a tunnel made to open and sustain a rift to the dark ether. On November 15, Kurtz developed Lures and an Exo-Element 1 harvester, which could only collect essence from tempests, crystalline humanoid capable of teleportation. The next day, Vogel developed a conversion machine using specimens rich in Exo-Element 1, which would allow them to open a portal to the dark ether. Resistance against Iwarit. Instrument of Revenge. The weakening of the dimensional membrane during the incident at Endstation not only opened a rift to the dark ether, but also awoke the artifacts uncovered by Daiwarit. The night of the incident, von List was in his office in a mobile headquarters near Leningrad, as Daiwarit was supporting Army Group North. When he grabbed one of the artifacts, he bonded with Cortifex. The former Lord of the Dark Ether made a bargain with von List, granting him the power to raise the dead, and in return, von List would help Cortifex make his vengeful return to the Dark Ether. Von List immediately notified Himmler about the situation, gathered all the pages of the Tome of Rituals regarding the Scepter of Cortifex, and locked them away in his office. Cortifex ordered him to destroy the other artifacts, but von List balked, thinking he could draw from their power too, and placed them in a locked trunk. He subsequently mobilized Daiwarit and launched an unauthorized deployment to Stalingrad called Operation Revenant, taking Kraft with him. Von List was present during the Battle of Stalingrad, leading an SS rescue mission to try break the siege. When the 6th Army surrendered, von List saw it as a humiliating defeat. Turning the city into the epicenter of his new operation was his ultimate revenge. Von List also launched several special operations, securing Hotel Royal in Paris in preparation of an invasion, occupying a farm in Normandy, which became a weak spot in the dimensional veil. After thousands of soldiers died during World War I, operating a dig site located in swamp known as Shino Numa in Okinawa to learn more about the other elder gods, and also guarding the temple where the Scepter of Cortifex was found in Egypt's eastern desert. When Daiwarit arrived in Stalingrad, taking the locals by surprise, the soldiers began securing the area and exhuming mass graves, both Germans and Soviets. Von List locked Kraft in a room with the remaining pages of the Tome of Rituals and the artifacts, ordering him to find anything that could boost Cortifex's powers. He also handed him a blank notebook to record the events that were about to unfold. Having had enough of von List's abuse, Kraft picked the lock of the trunk containing the artifacts and grabbed the mask of Belliker. The initial shock nearly killed Kraft, seizing up his heart and causing him to hit his head. When he awoke, he was no longer alone, having bonded with Belliker. The two discussed a plan to stop von List and Cortifex before Kraft released Belliker back into her artifact, realizing he was not an optimal host for her. Von List began awakening the exhumed corpses, creating revenants for his army of the dead. Horrified, Kraft used a radio to contact the Allied powers for help, before sealing his rune with a spell found in the Tome of Rituals, protecting himself from von List and his revenants. However, he was unable to reverse the spell, becoming trapped in the room. Not long after, a team Special Forces operatives arrived in the city as Cortifex used a containment spell to cut off the area from the outside. Kraft would lower the crate containing the remaining artifacts down to Special Forces, allowing them to bond with the other elder gods, Belliker, Nordicus, Invictor, and Syraxis. While the operatives couldn't escape the containment spell, the entities were able to send them for a brief amount of time to the other areas of operations, led by Daiwarit, hindering the battalion capabilities. With the help of Kraft, Belliker also developed a transmitter to send messages to the Dark Ether, hoping other beings will join the fight against the former lord. Although Cortifex promised von List he could create an army of millions, the task was far more difficult than the Elder God had anticipated. To strengthen his power, Cortifex called upon augmenter worms from the Dark Ether, and used an ancient blood rite to create Siphonkers, sacrificing some revenants to multiply them. He also summoned Zabala to support von List and Daiwarit. Although Zabala couldn't cross over the dimensional veil, she could create copies of herself to appear on Earth. The Special Forces also encountered a void spell that led to the Dark Ether itself. Within the spell, they found a page of Tome of Rituals protected by 4 unbreakable anchors. Unable to reach the page, the operatives escaped the spell back to Stalingrad, and the Elder Gods began elaborating a plan to get it. Stealing the tome page. Following an explosion at Daiwarit's outpost in the Egyptian desert, a portal appeared in Stalingrad, allowing the Special Force operatives to escape the city and reach the outpost, while Kraft was still trapped in his room. The portal was created by Verkana, who received one of Belliker's messages and created an artifact of her own, the Wand of the Wilds. From the outpost, the Special Forces succeeded in creating a beachhead into the Dark Ether, located in the corrupted lands below the construct floating up in the sky. Verkana also sent the Decimator shield to the other side, where he became trapped within crystals that formed following the explosion. Verkana found the shield dormant in the wilds of the Dark Ether, and, taking pity in the former Night Legion's commander, believed that he could be helpful for Belliker's plan. She didn't trust the humans at first, fearing the shield could fall into the wrong hands, but realized they were valuable. To free the shield from the crystals, Syraxis sent the operatives to their beachhead in the Dark Ether, to purge Augmenter worms. CODCAST was puzzled about their actions, but soon realized they were trying to awaken the Decimator shield. The special forces successfully removed the worms from the beachhead, freeing the shield. However, he remained dormant, leading Vercana to step in and hijack several of CODCAST's Sifunkers in order to use the Revenant's life energy to restore the shield. CODCAST sent Zabala to stop them, but the assassin was defeated. Upon waking up, the operatives entered the spell and used the shield to break the 4 anchors, allowing them to retrieve the tome page. After they returned, Kraft discovered that the page contained information on how to separate CODCAST from Von List, leading the group to wonder why neither Von List nor CODCAST used it against them. With the page in their possession, Vercana fully pledged herself to the Allies' cause and their resistance, stating that she had found her new clan, restoring the relic. In the weeks that followed the loss of the tome page, Von List ordered all Daiwarit personnel around the world to regroup at the Eastern Desert Outpost as operations were resumed. This included personnel at the Shino Numa excavation site, who promptly left for Egypt upon Von List's orders, leaving behind radio equipment, traps including electro-shock defenses and the flogger, as well as the experimental Wonderwolf DG-2 wonder weapon, developed by N Station's Ulrich Vogel. Much to Von List's dismay, the special forces arrived at the abandoned outpost to find the relic mirror mentioned in the tome page, with the goal of separating CODCAST from Von List. Although they asked Syraxis about information regarding the relic, she couldn't remember anything as she had big gaps in her memory, including her youth in the Dark Ether. Vercana pointed that the shrine located in the swamp could help Syraxis remember her past. The operatives successfully reactivated the shrine, which released an echo of Syraxis's memories. When asked about the relic, the echo replied that the relic, a bronze mirror, was split in half. When Syraxis attempted to pry further, the echo reacted aggressively, claiming that Syraxis had abandoned her, and that she was now a mere shadow of who she once was, before vanishing. Vercana informed the special forces that the 2 halves of the mirror laid between the mortal world and the Dark Ether. Using the flogger, they collected and drank the blood of Revenants, allowing them to see between the 2 realms. With this new sight, they found the 2 pieces of the relic and placed them on the altar at the dig site, where the artifact of Syraxis was originally found. The operatives managed to summon the Echo, who took the form of Syraxis. Syraxis once again demanded to know why CODCAST erased her memories, and why she seemed to matter to him. The Echo obliged and revealed that Syraxis was once CODCAST's consort. Shocked, Syraxis refused to accept the truth, which enraged the Echo, who then attacked the operatives. The special forces eventually defeated the Echo, who revealed more of Syraxis's past, including her child and CODCAST's punishment. With the Echo gone, Syraxis's memories were restored, including CODCAST's obsession with the construct. She warned that if Von List and CODCAST were to gain control of the construct's powers, everything and everyone, living or dead, will end up as their playthings. With the relic mirror restored, the operatives prepared for their final battle against CODCAST in the Eastern Desert. Downfall of the Archon. The original explosion at the Egyptian outpost was intended to create a bridge between Earth and the Dark Ether, to strengthen CODCAST's powers and bring more of his allies. Although the crystal contamination was deemed to safe at first, conditions significantly deteriorated in the week after all Daiwarit personnel were recalled. In order to prevent the Allied forces from interfering, Von List used CODCAST's powers to sabotage the Pack-a-Punch machine found in the area. This, however, increased the contamination, leading to the death of every Daiwarit soldier, with the exception of Von List. The special forces arrived in Egypt not long after, and managed to repair the Pack-a-Punch machine. Using the relic mirror, they separated CODCAST from Von List, sending him back into his artifact. However, CODCAST appeared in front of the operatives, revealing that it was all part of his plan. He was now free to return into the Dark Ether, to become the new Archon, and wipe out Earth from existence. CODCAST then teleported a dumbfounded Von List into Kraft's room, who held him at gunpoint. The operatives reached the Dark Ether as CODCAST was petitioning the construct. Although CODCAST sent his forces against the special forces, the construct noticed them and prevented him from killing them. The construct then sent the operatives back to Egypt and set up its trials to decide if they were worthy of challenging CODCAST. With the help of Von List and also the Decimator, the special forces completed the 3 trials. Back in Stalingrad, Kraft repeatedly asked Von List about his spouse. Von List ultimately revealed that Sasha died many months before, and that he was the one writing the letters, which sickened him. In a flash of anger, Kraft shot Von List, killing him. The special forces returned to the Dark Ether and discovered that CODCAST became the new Archon. A fight soon broke out as CODCAST transformed into a gigantic version of himself. As the Archon, CODCAST was able to use the powers of the other Elder Gods, including Verkana's healing abilities. The construct also protected CODCAST, creating an energy shield around him. Nonetheless, the operatives managed to defeat CODCAST, killing him by destroying his 3 eyes. As he died, CODCAST turned back into his normal size, and his corpse fell into the depths of the corrupted lands of the Dark Ether, while the construct disappeared. Operation Balder. Having studied the relativistic effects of the Dark Ether since the incident at End Station, Vogel proposed a plan to Uranvaren and the German High Command, sending an army into the Dark Ether which they could summon as a last resort to ensure the victory of the Third Reich. On December 14, 1944, the plan was approved and named Operation Balder, after the Norse god who rose after death. After a month of preparation, Task Force Balder, under the command of Gruppenführer Muller, arrived at the Marasco facility. Vogel sent instructions in Berlin on how to open the portal, and on January 27, he ordered all personnel to evacuate the Marasco facility. He also tasked Kurtz to take care of his young daughter, Angelica, as he stayed behind. Soon after, Task Force Balder crossed the threshold to the Dark Ether. The crossing was too much for the cyclotron, with several seals blowing in the process, contaminating the facility with more exo-element 1. Vogel, however, stayed in the facility and continued to monitor the task force for the next 2 days to ensure they were in position, believing he secured the future of the Reich. Unbeknownst to Vogel, Task Force Balder would become corrupted by the Dark Ether and turned into different creatures. The Red Army at End Station. On February 3, 1945, the 8th Guards Army of the Red Army arrived in Marasco and entered the facility. They recorded on film their progress, the rift created by the cyclotron and the zombies attack that followed. A week later, a cleaning crew led by NKVD Colonel Pavel Lazarev arrived at the facility. 14 soldiers were killed during the cleaning process. After the zombies were eliminated, Lazarev tasked Sergeant Kazimir Zykov of the 1st Guards Tank Army with shutting down the cyclotron. After being sealed inside the facility, Zykov successfully stopped the particle accelerator, but, in the process, was stranded in the Dark Ether for years to come. On February 21, Kurtz and Angelica were captured by the Red Army. Kurtz was interrogated by Lazarev, who accepted to spare Angelica's life if Kurtz gave the names and location of the End Station scientists. Kurtz agreed, and both were allowed to live in the Soviet Union under new names. Lucas Kurtz became Ivan Valentin, while Angelica Vogel became Alexandra Valentina. The film reels about Project End Station were sent to the Soviet archives and remained hidden for almost 40 years. Reactivation of the cyclotron. In March 1983, following the announcement of the Strategic Defense Initiative by U.S. President Ronald Reagan, KGB Chairman Viktor Chebrikov ordered the reactivation of Omega Group, a special Spetsnaz unit originally created to study psychotronic phenomena. Colonel Lev Kravchenko was given command of the unit and was tasked to find a way to counter the SDI, as it was considered a serious threat against the Soviet Union. Kravchenko, however, believed he was made a scapegoat by Chebrikov, thinking Omega Group would be disbanded in a matter of months, if not weeks. Omega Group was reorganized with Dr. Alexandra Valentina in charge of their psychotronics research and Dr. William Peck, an American who defected to the Soviet Union, as their exoscientific phenomena research led. Kravchenko then ordered them to scour the KGB archives for anything that would give them a strategic advantage over the United States and NATO. Valentina saw this as an opportunity to start her plan. Throughout her childhood, she had been visited by the Forsaken, who claimed to be her father. He guided her throughout her life, instructing her to complete Operation Balder and open a portal to the Dark Ether. It also showed her where to find the End Station film reels hidden within an NKVD intelligence vault when she first joined the KGB. On July 15, 1983, Valentina presented the reels to Kravchenko, who immediately flagged them for review with Chebrikov and the committee. After the reels were reviewed, Chebrikov authorized Omega Group to weaponize the findings of Project End Station and harness the power of the cyclotron and the Dark Ether. The new operation was dubbed Operatsiya Grabovshchik, or Operation Undertaker. The End Station facility in Marasco was secured by Omega Group in late August 1983, and, after 2 months of study, the cyclotron and the other experimental devices were restored to operational condition by late October. The reactivation of the cyclotron took place on November 1, 1983, and was overseen by Valentina and Peck. Valentina tasked two men, officers Medvedev and Orlov, to reactivate the collider. The men were successful, but Medvedev died, and Orlov was turned into a megaton in the process. With the reactivation of the cyclotron, several gateways and dimensional breaches started to appear around the world, including a massive super breach in the Ural Mountains. As the facility became overrun, Omega Group left the area. Formation of Requiem. On November 3, an emergency meeting took place regarding the outbreak zones. The meeting included the U.S. Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger and the Director of the CIA William Casey, who were tasked by Reagan to find a proportional response to the situation, while also containing and suppressing the threat. Edward Eddie Richthofen, the Associate Deputy Director of the Directorate of Science and Technology, proposed to create a subgroup within the DSNT, which would be staffed internationally, but remain firmly under US and CIA control. Unbeknownst to anyone else, Richthofen had ulterior motives to creating Requiem, ultimately answering to a mysterious board of directors. He was above all else dedicated to the completion of Project Janus. 2 days later, on November 5, the CIA Office of Requiem was created by Casey. Richthofen was named as the director of Requiem, leading the group. Under his leadership, 4 departments were created: Field Operations led by Special Operations Officer Gregory Weaver, Containment and Security, led by Major Mackenzie Carver, Unnatural Science, led by Dr. Elizabeth Gray, and Energy Research, led by Dr. Oscar Strauss, a former member of Project N Station, who joined the United States after the war. In the following days, Tatiana, a contact of Brunei Dollar's agent Samantha Maxis, told Maxis that the KGB uncovered something from their archives and a ground operation was happening in Poland. Tatiana managed to steal a copy of the N Station film and sent it to Maxis. Believing that the Brunei Dollars was compromised by Omega Group, Samantha left the agency but asked Dieter, the only Brunei Dollars agent she still trusted, to send the N Station tape to Requiem. After the CIA received the tape, Samantha contacted Weaver to persuade him to look at the footage. When Weaver asked her to turn herself over to the CIA for protection, she refused and even fought off teams sent by Weaver to retrieve her. Maxis then left Germany and arrived in Romania to pursue a new contact within Omega Group, Captain Sergei Ravanov, whom she believed could be turned. Operation Cerberus. With the intel provided by Maxis, Requiem authorized Operation Cerberus, a reconnaissance operation in Poland, on November 13, 1983. A strike team was dispatched to the Project N Station facility, where they discovered the cyclotron and its gateway to the Dark Ether. During their exploration of the site, the strike team entered the other dimension and encountered Mayak, the Megaton Overlord. The strike team also found a modified computer where a stranger made contact with them and retold his journey in the Dark Ether and the dangers present in this dimension. The strike team managed to partially resurrect Orlov using Der Wechseler, allowing him to assist them in shutting down the cyclotron to close the rift opened at Marasco. Orlov warned the strike team that Omega Group had big plans and stayed behind to ensure the facility would be destroyed. Raptor 1 exfiltrated the team as a nuclear detonation occurred. Weaver congratulated the team personally, but noted that their fight was far from over. In the months following the destruction of Project N Station, more rifts appeared around the world. A new arms race. Following the success of Operatsiya Grabovshik, a new operation called Operatsiya Inversia, or Operation Inversion, was approved by Omega Group on November 9 and would be led by Valentina. The goal of the operation was to weaponize Ethereum and anything they could find within the Dark Ether to win the Cold War. The construction of a facility in Vietnam, Outpost 25, began on November 11. The location of the facility was chosen because of its dimensional fertility, as a dimensional breach opened near the region. Outpost 25 would be overseen by Peck. Ethereum development. At Outpost 25, Peck designed a portal chamber on December 8, and a month later, on the night of January 8, 1984, Peck and Dr. Dmitry Kulkley managed to create a stable rift to the Dark Ether. Teams of Omega soldiers were now sent daily to collect Ethereum crystals, as well as biological, botanical, geological specimens, and liquid samples. Peck noted that Ethereum could yield massive amounts of energy and could be used as a sustainable power source, leading him to design an Ethereum reactor on February 10. Outpost 25 was now entirely running on 3 reactors. The excursions to the Dark Ether proved to be extremely dangerous, inflicting heavy loss among Omega ranks. To address the problem, Kravchenko requested the conscription of Ethereum miners dubbed Ethernauts, which was approved on February 15. Soon after, prisoners from work camps started to arrive at Outpost 25, comprised of common criminals, political dissidents, foreign prisoners, and intellectuals from both the Soviet Union and Vietnam. While the collection of Ethereum crystals rose to 237%, the excursions were still incredibly dangerous, with a quarter of Ethernauts sent to the Dark Ether never coming back. To provide protection to the mining teams, CODCAST designed the Red Soldier mechanized armor, although Peck took credit for it. Some miners who came back exhibited mild radiation poisoning or returned fully necrotized. Others suffered long-term memory loss. To circumvent this, Peck developed a memory transference machine, hoping it would restore the fractured minds of their conscripts. Peck also developed a truth serum to help recover memories. On March 14, 5 more test sites were opened throughout the Soviet Union, with 4 of them successfully creating their own breaches. Omega Group were now able to control where and when a dimensional breach would occur with nearly 70% accuracy. On March 19, Peck designed the first teleportation prototype at Outpost 25. Work on weaponizing the process began early April, and a missile battery in the Ural Mountains was identified as a candidate. On April 8, CODCAST developed the K-84, the first assault rifle powered with Ethereum, but was scolded by Peck, who deemed it a waste of time. On May 11, the canvassing for potential targets of Aparitsia and Bersia was completed by the KGB. While Valentina pushed hard to include Berlin in order to achieve her own plan, the committee selected Washington, D.C. and Manhattan. Requiem also developed new technologies using Ethereum samples retrieved from various outbreak zones they contained. Carver and his Containment and Security Division developed the weaponized Ethereum neutralizer devices and equipped all their operators in the field with them. Requiem also planned to thoroughly study the Dark Ether from within Soviet territory in the Ural Mountains and designed several devices for the operation. A specimen analyzer station and a recon rover conceived by Gray in the Unnatural Science Division on March 13 and April 14 respectively. An extraction rocket and an essence conversion module designed by Strauss and the Energy Research Division on April 17 and April 28 respectively, as well as a dimensional disruptor satellite created by Carver and the Containment and Security Division on March 8. Requiem also developed an Ethereum explosive designed to destroy massive Ethereum crystals detected in the Ural outbreak zone. Fall of Outpost 25. Following the destruction of N Station, Samantha Maxis, now operating on her own, had regular contact with Ravanov, who gave her documents and intel regarding the operations conducted by Omega Group. With the information provided by Ravanov, Maxis realized the full extent of Omega Group's plan. She decided to travel to Vietnam to meet with him and infiltrate Outpost 25 to expose Omega Group and deliver their research to Requiem. However, Omega Group intercepted some communications from Maxis and became aware of her plan. In early June 1984, Gorev, Kravchenko's right-hand man and tactical operations lead, traveled to Outpost 25 and warned Peck about Maxis. He tasked Peck to capture an interrogator to find who was the mole at the facility. Peck managed to capture Maxis and started to interrogate and torture her with no result. When he realized what happened, Ravanov contacted Weaver to warn him about Maxis's situation. Weaver and the rest of Requiem's senior staff discussed preparations for Operation Lost Property, a rescue mission to exfil Maxis and acquire any intel present in the facility. Under secret orders from the director of Requiem himself, Peck sent Maxis to the Dark Ether, telling her she was worthless and that nobody was coming for her. As time flowed differently in the Dark Ether, Maxis spent a considerable amount of time in the shadowy hellscape. As time went by, she reflected on herself and her past. Her memory, however, became blurred, and it became difficult to remember who she was. At one point, she awoke with blood on her hands holding a knife in the middle of what seemed to be a frenzied attack against Omega soldiers. Her hatred towards Peck grew stronger each day. She would also encounter a lost Russian soldier in the Dark Ether named Pyotr, who she told not to lose faith, and that despite how he looked, he was not worthless. On June 15, 1984, the dimensional breach at Outpost 25 released a massive burst of Ethereum, creating a lethal phasic barrier around the facility and turning everyone into zombies and other creatures. Peck managed to hide in a safe room and contacted Omega Group HQ for rescue. As he believed he was the sole survivor, not aware that Ravenov also survived in a nearby village. With the help of Ravenov, a Requiem strike team managed to enter the facility using one of the teleporters. The team reluctantly helped Peck restore the facility power in exchange for Maxis, but unbeknown to them, they helped him send all the research back to Omega. The team also found another modified computer and continued to communicate with the mysterious stranger. After using a truth serum on him, Peck revealed that Maxis was lost in the dark ether. The serum soon wore off, and Peck tricked the team into disrupting the dimensional rift, destroying all electronics and intel stored in the facility. They, however, used Requiem's dimensional disruptor satellite to open a new breach, allowing Maxis to escape. The team and Maxis managed to leave the facility and regrouped with Ravenov. Suddenly, a massive horde appeared in the village, but was neutralized by the team who fled the area. As Raptor 1 arrived, Ravenov informed Maxis that an operation was happening in the Ural Mountains, and he had to stay in the field like she once did. Back at Outpost 25, a detachment of Omega soldiers led by Valentina arrived to meet with Peck. To his surprise, Kravchenko also traveled to Vietnam. After having expressed his dissatisfaction with Peck's actions, Kravchenko asked him to show a demonstration of his commitment to Omega. Kravchenko then pulled out a knife and cut out Peck's right eye. Ural Outbreak Zone. Upon returning to Requiem HQ, Maxis was placed in quarantine to be tested. While Requiem estimated she only spent roughly 48 hours in the dark ether, physiological and metabolic data from the tests indicated she spent several months in the other dimension like she claimed. They also noted her eyes were now purple. Requiem kept her in isolation as they believed she was responsible for the outburst of Ethereum in Outpost 25. She was subsequently questioned by Carver, Strauss, and Gray, who were interested with her experience in the dark ether. She was deemed unfit to return to the field and was kept inside Requiem HQ for several months, with the radio she had used to contact the Requiem strike teams confiscated. Weaver, who visited her often, decided to give her a female Rottweiler to keep her company. On June 20, 1984, Requiem was authorized to launch Operation Threshold, a massive endeavor aimed to study the Ural Outbreak Zone, and retrieved Ethereum samples using devices developed by Requiem departments in the previous months. The operation started to interfere with Omega's plan, but both organizations tried to avoid direct interaction to prevent an escalation of the conflict. Unable to use teleporters within the Ural Outbreak Zone, Omega started to install boost modules, designed at Outpost 25 on June 21. The landing pads, however, could not be retrieved, forcing Omega's staff and soldiers to be fitted with parachutes. Omega survey teams noted that the outbreak zone was made of a massive phasic barrier separating small regions like islands and the ocean. They also noted that the barrier grew by 100 micrometers since it first appeared on November 1, 1983. They believed the barrier was maintained by giant Ethereum crystals, acting as terraforming nodes to match the properties of the dark ether. On July 8, Peck arrived at a missile silo in the Ural Outbreak Zone, with the task of continuing work on Apparitsia Inversia. Work on reality inversion warheads began immediately. Zykov began communicating with Peck from one of the modified computers Omega retrieved from the Outbreak Zone. Soon after, Peck assisted Omega soldiers in capturing 4 Tempests, which were attracted to the Ethereum power nodes. Peck noticed the way they metabolized Ethereum and found a way to use them for the reality inversion warheads. By July 14, the design of reality inversion warheads was finished. Using the captured Tempests to metabolize Ethereum and increase the yield of the missiles, the warheads were able to create a dimensional breach as large as 500 meters on impact and, in turn, form an outbreak zone of over 800 kilometers. Moreover, the electromagnetic interference generated by the Tempests would prevent the West from detecting the warheads and firing back. On July 22, Kravchenko took the leadership of Apparitsia Inversia from Valentina. Much to Valentina's disappointment, Kravchenko learned that something was lurking in the dark ether, and that while the West was still a threat, something far bigger loomed on the other side. This information was secretly given to Kravchenko by the director of Requiem himself. The reality inversion warheads were now pointed against this new enemy. On August 16, Valentina received the vision of her father, reassuring her that not all was lost, and his plan was still on schedule with new instructions for her. Knowing that Ravenov was still alive, she purposefully and indirectly leaked intel and documents regarding Apparitsia Inversia to him. At one point, Gorev noticed Peck's strange behavior talking with a modified computer and met with Valentina to discuss it. Fearing her plan might be discovered, she scolded Peck and questioned his loyalty to Omega, as he explained he had learned about an army gathering in the dark ether and the greatest evil the world had ever known. Valentina also prevented Gorev from warning Kravchenko about it, saying she would report it to him directly. In early October 1984, Zykov revealed himself to the Requiem strike team in the Ural Mountains. Requiem soon realized that Zykov was behind the communications with the modified computers, as well as the crafting stations, the dark ether crates, the beverages with physiologically altering effects, and the kiln fortifying weapons. Zykov warned Requiem that an army was mobilizing in the dark ether, and they needed to be ready. He also pleaded with them to help him escape and go home. Confrontations. Failure of Aparitzia and Versia. On November 16, with the help of Ravanov, who had acquired a listening device designed by Valentina, based on the beacon mechanism used by Requiem's team to navigate through the Ural outbreak zone, and the help of Gray and her comms protocols, Maxis established a covert and secure communication line with Requiem's strike team without Weaver's knowledge. She exhorted the strike team to meet with Ravanov in the Ruka's missile silo and help him thwart Aparitzia and Versia. When a strike team arrived at the location, Ravanov managed to secure the control room of the silo. They discovered that the warheads were still pointed to the US East Coast. When Ravanov asked Maxis for a target, she stated that no one should have access to the warheads, and they should be dumped into the Pacific Ocean. To launch the missiles, Ravanov needed the help of the strike team to retrieve the warheads' launch keys as he prepared them. After initiating the launch sequence, however, they found out that massive Ethereum crystals were obstructing the warhead hatches, and a giant tempest called Legion guarded them. With only 9 minutes before launch, the strike team successfully defeated Legion and destroyed the crystals, allowing the hatches to open. As the warheads launched, Raptor 1, who was sent by Maxis, arrived and the team left the area, while Ravanov stayed in the Ural Mountains. In the weeks following the event at Ruka, the strike team was cleared to return to active duty, after almost facing a court-martial, only to be spared by the director of Requiem. Weaver, who was furious about what had happened, confronted Gray and warned her to never cross his path ever again. He also confronted Maxis and, after a heated exchange, confined her to her quarters again with no more walks around the facility with her dog. Weaver soon received new orders from the director of Requiem and, on December 1st, had Maxis taken away for additional testing, based on reports from Gray about the high levels of Ethereum contamination in her bloodstream and cellular changes. As she was taken away, Weaver promised to take care of her dog. On December 3rd, after 2 days of travel, Maxis arrived at Block 8, a classified facility of the CIA built with an Ethereum seal. She was maintained in isolation after she attempted to flee the facility upon arrival. Maxis was subjected to several interrogation sessions led by the director of Requiem to assess her powers. During these sessions, he would ask her questions regarding her past that he himself already knew, such as her birthday and place of birth. After 15 days, the director managed to push her by stating that nobody at Requiem was caring for her, and that she was just a sad, little, lost girl. Filled with anger, Maxis used her telekinetic abilities to break the glass in her room. The director continued to torture Maxis over the next 2 months. During one session, he threatened to have her dog shot if she didn't teleport or somewhere safe. Capture of the strike team. At one point, Ravanov contacted Weaver, using Maxis's direct line, informing him that several Omega scientists, known as the Omega 8, were ready to defect to Requiem, as dissent and division were spreading within Omega Group. Weaver was soon authorized to launch Operation Excision to retrieve the defectors. On November 30th, Kravchenko reported that the missiles couldn't be recovered and would remain in the ocean. He soon decided to take direct actions against Requiem and tasked Dr. Hugo Jaeger, the research lead of necroanalytics at Omega, to infiltrate the defecting group of scientists. Jaeger's mission, code-named Aparitzia Isachenia, was to eliminate the scientists and set up a trap for Requiem's elite strike team. Kravchenko also became suspicious of Valentina after learning from Gorev that Peck had been talking to Zykov via one of the modified computers and planned to speak with her directly. On December 14th, Weaver contacted the strike team and informed them to meet with Ravanov and the Omega 8 near a sanatorium. Their helicopter, however, had crashed and they were now missing. After the strike team located the crash site, they recovered a message left by Jaeger, indicating the scientists survived and were heading near the monument located on the lake next to the sanatorium. The strike team also learned about the Ethereum neutralizer, a device developed by one of the defectors, Dr. Natalia Zarkova, to neutralize Ethereum particles, allowing safe passage through the deadly phase. A modified recon rover was left behind by the scientists to be used by the strike team to reach them. When the strike team arrived at the monument, they discovered the corpses of the scientists and a message from Jaeger taunting them and revealing his mission. Jaeger also indicated that the Ethereum neutralizer was now in Omega's possession. As the monument was being overrun with an auto-peering, Weaver ordered the team to leave the area. Raptor 1 arrived soon after to exfil the team, but they were shot down by Omega on their way out. Kravchenko arrived at the crash site and, as Omega soldiers dragged Raptor 1 from the helicopter, ordered the strike team to surrender. They were captured soon after. The Forsaken threat. In the early weeks of January 1985, Omega Group realized the extent of Valentina's deception and learned about her true identity as Ulrich Vogel's daughter. After the Apparizia Inversia failure and the loss of the reality inversion warheads, Valentina left Omega Group and remained hidden in Berlin, where she found the N-Station lab. She began her work to open a portal to the Dark Ether and complete Operation Balder. The director of Requiem, however, knew about Valentina's plan and secretly sent an experimental robot, Klaus, designed by Gray, as well as a nuclear device to a CIA safe house hidden beneath the wall in order to stop her. However, the team intercepted a communique meant for the director regarding Project Janus. To prevent any leak about the project, the director activated Klaus to kill the operative stationed at the safe house, defeating Valentina. In late January 1985, Valentina opened a portal to the Dark Ether by following the instructions left by her father 40 years before. An outbreak zone appeared around one of Berlin's checkpoints, unleashing the undead Nazi soldiers that was once Task Force Balder. Requiem managed to contain the situation and evacuate the inhabitants by using a cover story about a leak of nerve gas stockpile dating from the last war. The nuclear device, however, was lost when the outbreak happened. On February 2nd, after being held prisoner in Potsdam for several weeks, the strike team was released by Kravchenko into the Berlin outbreak zone to stop Valentina and prevent the Dark Ether army from entering Earth, using Raptor 1's life as leverage. The same day, Valentina crossed the threshold to the Dark Ether and met with her father, who convinced her to ascend and lead their army. Leaving her mortal body, Valentina ascended into a scarlet and crystallized form. It was then that she submitted the Forsaken, the powerful entity which had disguised itself as her father. The Forsaken had gained dominion over the Dark Ether and its elder gods, and had looked to devour the world since the day Omega Group had reopened the portal at the N-Station facility in Morasco. The strike team reactivated Klaus and uncovered the N-Station lab. Under the command of Gorev, Jaeger, and Peck, the strike team began working on a new reality inversion warhead to close the portal. The team recovered the uranium stolen from the lost nuclear device by a megaton and collected essence from Tempests using N-Station lures. As the team progressed, Valentina stepped out of the portal, unleashing more zombies and tormentors. She proclaimed that the dawn of a new Reich was upon them with her army on its way. Valentina and the strike team battled throughout the outbreak zone, but ultimately, the team managed to defeat Valentina. The team strapped her to the conversion machine built by her father and activated it, killing her. Her energy refined the essence, completing the reality inversion warhead. Klaus understood what its mission was and grabbed the warhead before stepping in the Dark Ether. The explosion closed the portal and stopped the outbreak. Kravchenko contacted the strike team to inform them that Raptor 1 was waiting for them. The team arrived in the streets of East Berlin. As they untied Raptor 1, Kravchenko arrived with his helicopter and attacked the strike team. At that moment, Maxis contacted the team and exhorted them to reach one of the building roofs. Maxis used her new powers to open a portal on the roof for the team to escape through. The team was teleported to a room at Block 8, where they met Weaver and Maxis, who was accompanied by her dog, Natso. As the director of Requiem reviewed the footage, he noted that Valentina was no longer a problem, and Project Janus could proceed unimpeded. He, however, noted that Maxis was becoming a problem that needed to be dealt with. He continued to torture her via experiments, and by February 1985, forced her to kill a captured Omega operative by threatening to kill Gray. Maxis complied but was distressed by her actions. Over the next 2 months, the director continued to assess Maxis's powers, which included telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation of objects, and creation of two-way portals among several others. Over the course of this testing, he impressed upon her just how powerful she was. 2 days after the event of Berlin, Kravchenko wrote a report to Chebrikov in order to save himself and prevent Omega Group from being disbanded. He concocted a story in which Requiem created an Ethereum-based narcotic compound capable of inducing aggressive paranoia and hallucinations, which had been injected into Valentina by a Requiem strike team during a mission in the Ural Mountains. Kravchenko stated that the team was captured, interrogated, and later executed, while he personally resolved the situation in Berlin. Escalation. By March 1985, the situation in the Ural outbreak zone became critical with an increased dark ether activity and hostile encounters. Gorev reported to Kravchenko that dark ether vortices started to appear every day, accelerating the expansion of the phase and the terraforming of the region. Requiem also reported increased activities and expanded Operation Threshold to the Atlantic and Algeria, where two massive outbreak zones had appeared. Several outbreaks also occurred in Germany and Nebraska, where people claimed to have heard the voices of deceased relatives. Both organizations assumed this escalation by the Forsaken was in retaliation for the Berlin incident. On May 21, several outbreak zones including the Ural outbreak zone collapsed entirely, with their phase expanding rapidly and Ethereum levels rising by 5,000% in just a few minutes. Requiem reported that the areas were now uninhabitable for life as they knew it, and several teams went missing. They believed the dark ether vortices heavily contributed to the acceleration of the terraforming process. By the end of the day, each outbreak zone continued to slowly grow by 0.25 inches. They concluded that severing their connection with the dark ether would be the only solution to reverse the terraforming. Securing Zykov. Before Valentina's scheme, the KGB approved a new operation for Omega Group on January 11, 1985, Operatsiya Izbavitelь, or Operation Deliverer. The goals of the operation were to build a particle accelerator and dimensional amplifier, to recover Kazimir Zykov, who would provide information on the Forsaken, and to construct a containment chamber to capture the Forsaken, so it could be reprogrammed and used against the Western Bloc. However, the approval of the operation was not unanimous, with members of the committee citing the cost of Omega's operation and its limited success. The committee was also concerned about investing in the dark ether, as the risks outweighed the rewards. Chebrikov warned Kravchenko that the future of Omega Group was tied with the outcome of that new operation. In the days following his report about the Berlin incident, Kravchenko met with Gorev, Jaeger and Peck. Kravchenko revealed Izbavitelь to Gorev and Jaeger, as well as his new plan with Peck, much to Gorev's dismay and confusion for having been kept in the dark. Zykov provided several schematics and parts to Peck in order to build a device to help him escape and a machine to kill the Forsaken. Unbeknownst to Zykov, however, Omega planned to capture the Forsaken rather than kill it. On January 22, Peck finished designing the particle accelerator and dimensional amplifier with the particle accelerator, matching the specification of the end-station cyclotron. Peck also contacted the director of Requiem, informing him about the new operation. On February 9, Peck reported to Kravchenko that, after several weeks, he finally managed to triangulate the position of Zykov within the dark ether, but that it would require Omega to harness primordial ether energy to extract him from the nightmarish dimension. Peck suggested that Test Site Anna, a facility located in Ukraine which was shuttered following an incident in 1981 and was originally used for Operatsiya Inversia, would be the perfect facility to build the machines to free him because of its large power grid and equipment made to handle excess amounts of Ethereum. On March 28, Peck finalized the containment chamber design for the Forsaken, including a spherical device secretly using specifications from the director of Requiem. That night, Gorev and Kravchenko discussed the potential targets for unleashing the Forsaken upon, including Washington, D.C., New York City, London, Berlin, and Afghanistan. On April 18, all the resources and personnel of each department at Omega were diverted in support of Operatsiya Izbavitelь. With every other operation suspended, personnel were sent to Test Site Anna, while skeleton crews remained at every outpost and facility. The reallocation of resources accelerated the timeline of the operation, and Peck was confident that everything was going to be fully operational by July, with an extraction scheduled for July 4, 1985. However, Kravchenko revealed to Peck that the timeline had moved up by a month, and he needed to be ready for June 4. Peck contacted the director of Requiem soon after to inform him about the change. In early May, Ravanov, who was blacklisted by the CIA following Operation Excision, contacted Weaver and revealed that he had information regarding Aparitzia Isbabatal and its location in the Zakarpatska Oblast. He had sent a courier to a Requiem dead drop in Madrid with documents, hoping that, with the director knowing of the communication, Maxis would be released in exchange. Maxis was still at Block 8 following the Berlin incident, but the director allowed her to contact the different strike teams still in the field before the collapses, as well as sending letters to Weaver and Elizabeth Gray. On May 12, Requiem was authorized to proceed with Operation First Domino, a direct response to Omega's Aparitzia Isbabatal, with all the departments working together on this operation, aimed at securing Zykov and taking him into custody before Omega could do so. On May 28, the director approved Maxis for the operation, stating that she had learned a lot about her powers and how to control them. However, he prevented her from returning to the field and ordered her to remain at Block 8 during the operation, where she would use her powers to open a portal for the strike team. Last stand and aftermath. In the early hours of June 4, 1985, Peck and Kravchenko ran several tests to open a dimensional gateway from the facility observation tower, while Jaeger and Gorev waited in a nearby airfield, ready to extract the Forsaken once it was sealed in the containment chamber and bring it to an Omega facility near Moscow. Both men, however, had doubts about the mission's chances of success. At 9:32 a.m., during test number 8, an uncontrolled dimensional breach occurred in the facility, consuming all Omega personnel and soldiers, apart from Peck and Kravchenko. Kravchenko prevented Peck from closing the gateway until they had Zykov. The Requiem strike team arrived outside the facility soon after via a portal created by Samantha. Supported by Ravanov, the team used an Omega teleporter to enter the facility and was greeted by Kravchenko, who informed them they were too late. The team reached the observation tower watching over the town square replica, where an active teleporter was located. Kravchenko, Peck, and the strike team witnessed the return of Zykov from the Dark Ether. The lost Russian thanked them before turning himself into the Forsaken. The entity revealed that while it had been 40 years on Earth since Zykov closed the in-station gateway, 4 centuries had passed in the Dark Ether, during which Zykov had had to survive and evolve. As he consumed stronger beings than himself, Zykov ultimately was replaced by the Forsaken. The entity then taunted Peck, stating that he had tricked Peck into releasing him from the Dark Ether, and that their realm would now be consumed. Kravchenko lashed out at Peck as zombies swarmed the tower. At this moment, Samantha manifested herself in the facility and used her powers to temporarily hold the Forsaken off. Having heard an explosion, Gorev and Jaeger flew above the facility and discovered what was happening. The two men agreed to ignore Kravchenko's cries for help and reinforcement, leaving the failure of the operation on Kravchenko alone, and left the area. Jaeger had a secret contact who could grant both men safe passage to the west. The strike team learned that the Forsaken was now protected by a phasic barrier, and that an Ethereum neutralizer was required to reach the entity. With the assistance of Peck, the team built a makeshift device. They also received the help of an unlikely ally, Sparagmos, a zealot of the Dark Ether seeking revenge on the Stealer of Souls for enslaving his disciples. With his guidance, the team forged the Chrysolax. As the team activated the device, an explosion occurred in the observation tower where Peck and Kravchenko were located after Peck mistakenly shot a gas pipe. The strike team then proceeded to the town square. With the help of Samantha, who used her powers to activate Ethereum gun turrets, the team managed to expose the Forsaken's core. As the Forsaken launched a massive counterattack, Samantha sacrificed herself and dived into its core, sealing herself in the Dark Ether. Weakened, the Forsaken was drawn into the spherical device in the containment chamber. With its capture, the outbreak zones around the world began to lessen and collapsed. Soon after, a helicopter arrived to transport the spherical device out of the Soviet Union. The strike team bid farewell to Ravanov before leaving with Raptor 1. At his deck, the director of Requiem noted that with Maxis now locked in the Dark Ether, she was no longer a problem for Project Janus. He ordered the strike team be sent to Black Site 13 for indefinite containment, before shutting down Requiem. He then ordered his agents to move on Requiem's senior staff, watching Gray, Carver, Strauss, Weaver, Raptor 1, and the strike team being arrested from his monitors. Director Richthofen grabbed his briefcase from his desk and left his office. 5 years later, having survived the events at Test Site Anna, Peck traveled to a boathouse in Japan in 1990. There, he would rent a boat from a local fisherman to travel to the Pacific Ocean, where the Aparitzia and Versia warheads lay, to find some old friends. Chaos story. Ancient times. For millennia, the Earth was filled with prima materia, The first matter, the raw chaos. The resource was plentiful and humanity mined deep into the earth to recover it. With it, ancient rulers, kings, priests, and emperors created powerful and prospering civilizations. But the power of prima materia consumed them, their benevolence turned to greed, and they stopped caring for their people. One by one, their civilizations fell, and wars were waged. Thus, the prima materia was extinguished, but humanity found a way to create an endless supply of this first matter. However, this knowledge was deemed too dangerous, and mankind could not be trusted with it. Men of science, philosophy, and reason came together to protect and keep that knowledge safe. They were known as the Nine. Their collection of knowledge grew as mankind progressed. Each new discovery made was secured by the Nine to preserve it from humanity. Over the centuries, their collection became legend. But the Nine were mortals and, as such, were affected by their thoughts and beliefs. Once they decided to release their knowledge to the world as a beacon of humanity, this release brought about fierce wars. So the Nine took their knowledge and hid it once again from mankind. But they believed that amongst all humanity, some people were worthy of their knowledge. As a result, they came to create the Sentinel artifacts, based around the different mythologies known to man. Sometimes after the 2nd century BCE, Perseus arrived in Delphi with his men and his mount Pegasus. Perseus met with the Pythia and gave her his demands, activating a Sentinel artifact to prove himself worthy of taking his father's throne on Mount Olympus. When the Pythia refused, auguring disaster, Perseus had her 2 sisters detained. Fearing for their lives, the Pythia activated the Sentinel trial before being locked to her chair by Perseus. At first, she helped Perseus and his men. But as the months went by, she stopped helping them. After the Pythia's sisters tried to escape, Perseus had them beheaded. The trial ran for centuries, and Perseus, now alone, was trapped in a chamber by the Pythia before being attacked by zombies. During the second half of 19th century, Alastair Rhodes, a wealthy British adventurer, bought a country estate in Hampshire, England, after he learnt about Druid ruins on the land, and renamed it Rhodes Manor. At the end of the century, Alastair brought his young daughter, Scarlett, to a museum, where he asked her to watch for anybody observing them. While he was looking for an item, a black rock glistening with diamonds. Unfortunately, policemen arrived and Alastair was arrested. Scarlett was separated from her father and grew up with relatives in care homes or amongst nuns. She did not see her father again for the next 15 years. In 1909, hundreds of dissident members of the Rosicrucian order in England created a new cult under the leadership of the High Priest of Chaos. The goal of this new order was to force mankind to evolve by acquiring the Sentinel artifacts and accessing the knowledge of the Nine. Alastair, who has learned about this new order and judged their intentions as nefarious, started his journey to access the knowledge of the Nine and empower humanity with it. Alastair Rhodes travels. Morocco. The following year, in September 1910, Alastair traveled to Morocco to meet Bruno Delacroix, a former enforcer of a criminal gang in the Paris underworld, who joined the French Foreign Legion after he had attempted to assassinate Michel Depardieu, a rival gang boss, but inadvertently killed the latter's child. This led to his former boss, Lebeau, placing a bounty on Bruno's head. Alastair explained to Bruno that his former associate stole an object he is looking for, and that neither they nor their employers, the newly formed order, should be allowed to have it. Bruno agreed to assist Alastair, and the two traveled to Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. They ambushed the convoy and stole a large wooden box before driving to the Basilica cistern, with the rest of the criminal gang hunting them. After arriving at the cistern, Alastair revealed that the wooden box contained the object he was looking for, the Scepter of Ra. Alastair needed the scepter to reveal a map hidden inside the cistern, pointing to Angkor Wat and the French protectorate of Cambodia. Unfortunately for the duo, the gang found them, and Lebeau ordered the members to storm the cistern to get the scepter back before their employers. The order arrived. Bruno managed to kill the gang members, but Alastair was captured by Lebeau. Bruno rushed to Lebeau to save Alastair and took several bullets in the chest, but managed to crush his skull with his bare hand, killing him. Bruno succumbed to his injuries only to be revived by Alastair with the Scepter of Ra. Breathing again, Bruno swore to help Alastair whenever he needed him. Only one gang member survived the encounter. When he escaped the cistern, the high priest and several cultists were waiting for him. After learning that the Scepter of Ra had been stolen from the gang, the high priest and the cultists stabbed him to death. Cambodia. Several months after the event, In March 1911, Alastair met with Stanton Shaw in the city of Siem Reap, in the French Protectorate of Cambodia. Shaw was a close friend of Alastair's and a chemist who was so obsessed with his work that his wife left him and took their children with her. Alastair was trying to convince Shaw to help him on his journey when German soldiers captured Shaw. The German officer told Shaw that the containers they used, which Shaw had claimed would work perfectly, had leaked the poison gas they stored and killed 147 of his men. Shaw was saved from being executed thanks to Alastair, who promised to give the officer the greatest weapon the world had ever seen. With the help of Shaw, they traveled to Angkor Wat where Shaw decoded symbols on a wall and learned about the prima materia sealed behind it. The soldiers managed to enter the hidden room and found a small jar on an altar. Upon opening it, prima materia was released into the air and attacked the officer and the rest of the soldiers, turning them into zombies. Alastair and Shaw fled through the temple while being pursued by the zombies. While fleeing, Shaw managed to create an explosive powerful enough to collapse the tunnel after them. The explosion, however, was so powerful that a part of the temple collapsed, almost killing the duo. Later, they recalled what happened and Alastair confessed to Shaw he was never there for the prima materia and was glad that thanks to the explosion, the order was denied any information about it. Alastair told Shaw that he would meet him again one day before leaving. Unbeknownst to Alastair, the high priest was following him. Sometime after, in 1912, Alastair found the Norse artifact was in the Natural History Museum in London and was about to be moved to a private collection in the Harvard University in the United States the next year. Alastair also discovered the key for the artifact in a magazine which featured a Mexican spy named Diego Nicali, with the key around his neck. After learning Diego was willing to meet Alastair, Alastair's butler, Godfrey, made the travel arrangements. Mexico. Alastair and Diego met in a saloon in Ciudad Juarez during the Mexican Revolution. Alastair told Diego he was looking for the greatest power mankind has ever known, and that he needed his medallion. Diego replied his medallion was a family heirloom, and recounted that his mother told him it was part of something bigger that needed to be protected, to be kept safe. He refused to give it to Alastair before the two men were interrupted by the high priest and members of the order, wearing normal clothes instead of their ceremonial dress. A fight broke out and Diego was knocked unconscious while Alastair was captured by the order. Alastair managed to steal a revolver from one of the cultists before being saved by Diego, and the two men escaped using a carriage. Diego finally agreed to loan his medallion to Alastair, hoping to have it returned one day, before telling him to leave the city for his safety. Although they couldn't get the medallion, the order was able to find Scarlet. Fearing for his life and believing she would be strong enough to overcome what was to come, Alastair wrote a letter to Scarlet, where he explained his travels and the order's intentions. He sent the letter with a package containing the key for the Norse artifact, as well as tickets for the RMS Titanic. Upon receiving the letter, Scarlet left for Rhodes Manor. Burning of Rhodes Manor. On the evening of March 20, 1912, Alastair Rhodes invited dozens of friends and relations to the Rhodes Manor. Before the guests arrived, Godfrey knocked out Alastair and locked him in the wine cellar. Godfrey fell under the influence of the order after being killed and revived with the Scepter of Ra, with a red mark appearing on his forehead. During the party, Scarlet arrived at Rhodes Manor, only to be fended off by Godfrey and pursued by the high priest and his cultists into the forest nearby. Inside the manor, Godfrey, still under the influence of the order, started drawing glyphs on the ground before being approached by some of Alastair's guests, Gideon Jones, Christina Fowler and Jonathan Warwick. At the same time, members of the order activated the Celtic artifact, which was in the possession of Alastair Rhodes, starting the trial and releasing prima materia into the manor, turning all the guests into zombies. Only Godfrey and the three other guests were saved from the prima materia, thanks to the glyphs. Outside of the manor, Scarlet led the high priest and the cultists through the woods where she killed several cultists. She was briefly subdued by the high priest, but managed to kill him. He warned her that she couldn't stop them and more would come. Scarlet entered Rhodes Manor, only to find the guests, who had changed back to normal, were killed by the order. She took a revolver and started looking for her father. With the trial completed and the shadow werewolf killed, a vision of the Norse artifact appeared inside the manor. At the same moment, the red mark appeared on Godfrey's forehead, and he killed Gideon, Christina, and Jonathan, calling them unworthy before ordering the rest of the cultists to load Alastair into a car and leave. Scarlet shot Godfrey in the back and asked him where Alastair Rhodes was. Godfrey told her she was too late and couldn't stop what was to come. During the confrontation, a fire broke out and soon all the manor was on fire. Scarlet jumped in a car and pursued the cultists. Unfortunately, Her car broke during the pursuit and crashed on the side of the road. Alistair was then loaded into a plane before it took off. In the following month, Scarlett contacted Bruno Delacroix, Stanton Shaw, and Diego Nicali, as they were the only people her father trusted to help her. On April 10, 1912, the four met in Southampton, where Scarlett explained to them what had happened that night and what they would have to do: steal the Norse artifact. They all agreed to help her find her father, and the group embarked on the Titanic. Sinking of the Titanic. During the night of April 14, 1912, the group started their plan to steal the Norse artifact. Diego charmed one of the passengers, Lady McKendrick, and stole the key to the millionaire suite, where Bruno and Shaw delivered a gas into the cargo room, using the pneumatic tubes in the suite. Once the guard was knocked out, Scarlett entered the room and, using a device of her own invention, opened the safe where the artifact was kept. Unfortunately, the plan didn't go as planned when a cultist, bearing the red mark on his forehead, stole the artifact from Scarlett and took the medallion. While trying to flee, he was stopped by Bruno, Shaw, and Diego, who regrouped with Scarlett. Surrounded, the cultist activated the Norse artifact, but was kicked out of the protective circle by Scarlett and turned into a zombie like the rest of the passengers and crew. Soon after, the Titanic struck a massive iceberg, allowing water to seep in. The team proceeded to complete the trial and beat the Eye of Malice and Despair. After the trial was completed, all the passengers and the crew turned back to normal, and a vision of a doorway surrounded by two snake heads appeared in the cargo hold. Soon after, the Titanic started sinking and Scarlett, Bruno, Shaw, and Diego took a lifeboat. While they were waiting for rescue, Shaw recalled having seen the doorway before only in books in Delphi. A red mark appeared on Bruno's forehead. Journey to Delphi. In the following days, the team traveled to Delphi in the Kingdom of Greece and ventured into a cave where they found a sealed door. The voice of an oracle, the Pythia, invited them to breathe the vapors to find the knowledge they were seeking, but warned them it was not intended for mortal man. Opening the door. Upon breathing the vapors, the team was transported across millennia and woke up in an ancient Colosseum during what seems to be antiquity. They watched the High Priest of Chaos activating the Egyptian artifact in front of hundreds of cultists, all spared by the prima materia. The High Priest was forcing slaves to complete the trial for him, and Scarlett, Shaw, Diego, and Bruno were the next contenders. The team completed the trial, beat the Guardian, an elephant named Fury, and Wrath, another elephant and the champion of the Nine. Once the trial was completed, a portal appeared with the word Poseidon. Upon reaching his hand into the portal, the High Priest was attacked by prima materia, only to be saved by the glyphs under his mask. Scarlett ordered the High Priest to grant them clemency as dictated in the Novum Ignitum proclamation, but the High Priest ordered his cultists to behead them. Freeing the Oracle. After awakening from the hallucination, Scarlett immediately went towards a gate near them, placing her hand upon ancient symbols to open the gate. As the gate opened, it revealed a tunnel, revealing the ancient city of Delphi. Noticing the ropes to climb down to the city, the crew realized that they were not the first to tread upon this city. Whilst inside the city, they were led by the Pythia to the Temple of Apollo, where they found she was imprisoned within the city. She proclaimed that, like her, Alistair was trapped in Delphi. Whilst on their journey, the crew encountered Perseus, who had turned into the zombie warlord. While examining some runes, Bruno was taken over by his dark self and killed Shaw. Shaw was subsequently revived by Bruno using the Scepter of Ra, allowing the Order to take control. Soon after, the crew confronted Perseus, who took control of Pegasus by striking him with his sword. After killing both Pegasus and Perseus and retrieving the key, the crew returned to the Temple of Apollo to free the Oracle. Scarlett stayed with the Pythia, while Diego, Bruno, and Shaw left to find Alistair beneath the temple. They discovered that Alistair, alongside several members of the Order, was turned to stone. Diego realized the true intent of the Oracle and rushed to save Scarlett. As Scarlett freed the dying Oracle, she became mesmerized by the Pythia, which allowed her to gain